him at the mic.
I would like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session for December 6, 2021. Welcome, everyone. First up is the approval of the work session agenda, and you all have a copy of that before you. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda with the changes on page 3 or any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chairman, as you know, we've talked about the gun ordinance a number of times over the last 6 or 8 months, and I'd like for us to add that to this evening's agenda. And
Okay, are you making that in the form of a motion?
I am, yeah, and I would assume we would want to put that, I don't know if it would be considered new business or put it on the consent agenda. I'd probably be on the consent agenda.
Okay, well, for tonight's purposes, I would say that probably would go on discussion items for action.
Okay, all right.
And that would be item 5.17.
Okay.
Okay, and is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion before us to approve the work session agenda with the addition of item 5.17, discussion of the gun ordinance. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. That motion passes. We do have need of a closed session. We're one at the beginning of the meeting, then we'll have another at the end of the meeting. Hopefully this first one will be relatively brief. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session as authorized by North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say no. Okay, so we are now in closed session, and for this first closed session, we're going to move to our regular meeting chambers down the hall, and please bear with us. We'll be back shortly. Okay, we are back on air, and we have completed our closed session, and we move now to discussion items for tonight. First up, item 4.1, our innovation report, and we're happy to have Todd Shanley with us for that tonight. Welcome, sir.
To appear behind the door, and I will share my screen as well.
Before they get started, as you know, Miss Brandon retired as of Friday, so she is out and doing her thing on the other side, right?
Yes,
on the
sir.
side, on the
Yes.
private side. So,
Yes. Exciting times for her, right? And it definitely, this will be a shout out to her as 25 years ago, probably right about this time, we launched our first website. So, and she was the programmer, the developer, the brains behind that. So that was some interesting conversations we had last week as we were prepping to bring this report to you. We're going to talk about the website redesign as our innovation report this week and just bring that to you. But again, as she started with us, the book club is reading or listening to The Gift of Time. I feel like this was a gift she left for me because it is a book about delegation and an area that we can all probably benefit from. So it'll be it's a good read. I've started it, and it's definitely an interesting topic, not just delegating down, but delegating up and making sure that you're using all of the resources that you have available. So it'll be a great asset, and I'll do my best to try to sub in for her going forward on that. Again, so I think it's fantastic the way that we have tied these innovation reports to the strategic plan. These cards that she passed out previously have been a great asset to me. I know that as we start working on different projects, I have the team pull them out, and then as I prepared for this presentation today, I looked at it, and obviously the website is really ties into the transparent and accountable government piece of what we do here at Cabarrus County. And then on the back of each of these cards, it has the goals. And as I reviewed it as well, obviously it's all of these goals, ensuring that we engage with an accountable workforce, provide exceptional service. We do a lot of that through our website today. Perform analysis of forecast reporting to ensure stewardship of funds, longevity of current and future assets. Again, the website is a big piece of that. Creating opportunities for people to see value in the work, Cabarrus County, here county government. Yeah, that is a big piece that Kasha can talk about that she uses the website to do, and develop creative technology solutions to support the county services. And again, we try to drive as many of those services online as we can to help our constituents have full access to government as often as they can. So let me just jump into a little bit. This is our current piece of our current website. In case you have not been there recently, that's what the current homepage looks like. And there's a lot of scrolling that goes on to that. So there's areas that are call outs that we have that are in place to get to the different services. But this is the top of the homepage, just as a reference if you haven't seen it in a while. We've selected Open Cities Granicus team to help us with the redesign of the website. There were two reasons we selected that group. Was the number one piece for me was the content management system. That's important to me as a technology person, and is important to you as a board, because that is going to give our staff the ability to keep this website updated and current. The current solution that we have today is very limited, so a lot of those requests have to come to my team to keep the site updated and active, and it just doesn't encourage that the content to be as fresh as it should be. The other piece of that is their methodology. They are very project management based, and we're very excited to share with you some of that information, how they're going to attack that through their methodology, and you'll see that in the next slides. But I'm going to let Kasha talk about some of the goals that we developed as a team to, for this website.
Sure, thanks, Todd. Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for having us. One of the very important things to remember about projects like a website or like our branding project is you're giving departments a chance to work together. We have 20 different departments that cover everything from the sheriff's office to libraries. And our purpose is wide-reaching, and the opportunities we have to collaborate are few and far between. And so this is one of those projects that allows staff to come together and think about things as a collective. And as Todd mentioned, this CMS is going to give us the opportunity to let them work together, to troubleshoot problems together, and to get feedback from each other as users of a different department site and as content editors. So if we go through the goals we have listed here, maintain and enhance transparency. As you know, that's something we're very proud of. Our work, our aspirations to be as transparent as possible. A lot of times folks come to our website and it's the only place where they know to get information from the county. They may not have an opportunity to connect with us face to face. We see a lot of people at the fair. It's Jonathan's favorite way of connecting with folks, but this is another way that we reach a lot of people who would not otherwise know that they communicate with or have interactions with the government. So we really want to make it a thorough, easy to navigate hub for our visitors, no matter what their purpose or reason or where they're located within the world. The users range from local contractors needing Excella, probably one of our most engaged user groups. The contractors have really caught on to the system. It's something that they interact with several times a day, and they're counting on us to provide those services. So it's up to us to make sure they're comfortable with it and it meets their business goals. And especially in a growing community, having that set and having that relationship builds trust, which is one of our end goals with the public. And then there are ways for people to know more about what's posted on social. So they'll see an article posted on social, but they want to dig into the content the website becomes our historical record, especially as the newspapers aren't able to cover as much, and that changing landscape happens. They're going to count on us to keep that historical context. And we try to publish articles that are informative and really give them some context of the projects that they're interested in. Next, provided update historical information. Department involvement in the process will help us create a deeper well of knowledge and aid in keeping the site as updated as possible. As Todd mentioned, folks will be able to go in and make their own changes. We talk about the demands on Todd's staff and our staff to get changes made, and sometimes those can add up, and we're having to prioritize. By the departments having some ownership, they'll be engaged in the content. They'll know what's on their site, so when they tell folks it's on there, they know it's on there, or they know to act quickly and add it on there. And it'll give them a relationship with the website, which is really what we want. To act as a first connection between the county and the public, as mentioned. Early discussions center on what our community is and what it strives to be. And we were very fortunate through our branding process to learn 4 values that are important to our community: family, faith, collaboration, and tradition. And we want to see those elements reflected, as well as the diversity and varied interests of our audience. We want to make sure all of that is represented. The site should reflect those collective values in words, images, and the site flow. So when we start talking about the design concepts, it's a little more than just picking out a picture. It's making sure it matches who we are and who our community is. And then building internal connections with updated, robust intranet. One of the things users on the outside won't see is the opportunity we'll have to support internal needs through an internal website. And when you talk about 1,400 people connecting, it's important to have a place for them to go for reliable information. Each time we have a new employee training, we ask them what their last employer did right or wrong, and what can we learn from that, and how can we support them. And it's the sharing of information in a timely and thorough way that they feel between their managers to them and also the organization to them is most important to their needs. So we want to set them up for success from day one. So hopefully our work on this project will end in all those wonderful connections.
So as Kasha mentioned, the goals of the project are definitely to collaborate with as a group. So the methodology I spoke of earlier is they established these 3 teams. Our core team, which is I'm leading this team with technology staff and communications outreach staff. So we've established this collaborative team to be able to get the work done, basically, to achieve the process of getting us a new website. But the bigger lift is on the steering committee. The steering committee is represented by nearly every department in the county, and they have a spokesperson that is going to meet with us and work with us to make sure that their department is properly represented on the website. So they have a 2-way communication, one back to the core team, but also back to the department to make sure that everything that their department head wants to be, posted on the website is getting out there. So we're working through that process and building that. That's a redacted list. There's a couple other folks from DHS that are missing from this list, but we have a very large steering committee group. And then the executive stakeholders is basically the department heads and the county manager staff. And what we're doing with that group is we're communicating to them monthly. So this will serve as that first monthly blast, because the slides I'm about to cover are basically the briefing that I'll send out in an email tomorrow to everyone, letting them know where we are and how we've gotten there. But it's a great representation, and I've spoken to nearly all of these department heads about the representation that they put on that previous committee. So what we've accomplished so far, we've established several kickoff meetings. Every IT project has more kickoff meetings than I would care to mention, to be honest with you. You can see there's already 3 or 4 on there. The design workshops are the one that are interesting. The Digital Service Academy, I think that has a lot of promise. I think that Kasha's probably excited about that, because it's going to help our staff learn how to communicate to the public. You know, they have the methodology that Open Cities brings to us is they teach this academy that says, hey, you know, don't use government speak. I know that's one of Mike's pet peeves for us as staff is that we use acronyms far too often, and we use government words that we are used to using with each other, but we need to be able to communicate to the public in a clear way. So I think the Digital Service Academy has a lot of hope and help with that. One of it's an IT thing, but that single sign-on for admin users, that's a big deal. For being able to have single sign-on is a big security step for us to be able to make sure that we don't have a lot of other random IT, you know, security issues out there. So in progress right now, content rationalization, a fancy word for saying, hey, we're looking at the website today and trying to figure out what's out there, what do we need to get rid of, what do we need to improve on, what can just go. We're using Google Analytics that we've had in place for a long time to review what's actually getting clicked on. You know, what is there a page that we've created out there that just nobody's actually going to, and do we need to do anything with? The other important piece here is the conducting the resident website experience survey. I'll show a link to that here in a second, but there's a way for the public to give us feedback before we get too far down the road with this and say, hey, here's what we're doing. And then they're going to do a post survey to say, hey, did we actually improve the thing that you were worried about? So there's a lot of outreach, and that is, again, back to Open Cities methodology and process to this, and that's why we selected them to help us with that. And again, it mentions the Digital Service Academy content and pieces there again. So here's this is right on the center of the website, so it's not too hard to find. It's right at cabarruscounty.us. It's the green bar going right across the middle. I believe Kasha's going to push this out on social media here a little bit too to be able to do that. You click the button and it pulls you right to the survey. So the public can immediately start giving us feedback today. It's out there today. So we're ready to receive that feedback. And we'll leave it up there throughout the project to be able to keep getting that feedback. Again, so the next steps: review those survey results, conduct some additional design, and really start hitting those academy things. And then again, single sign-on for all of the users. Now, again, I key back to that single sign-on piece. That means that the staff is going to be able to have access to the content editors for the staff in Cabarrus County are going to have access to do that with their own passwords versus having to remember a separate password. So it does become a barrier to them actually doing the work and creating the content. Finally, I threw in some slides here to talk about, just to refresh your memory of where we were and where we've come from. This is that original website that Debbie created. Obviously, that's it looks very rudimentary, but that was very difficult back in 1996-ish. So that was a big deal to be able to make a site that looked like that. This was this was about 5 or 6 years later. Pretty basic. They were, this still early 2000s. There wasn't a lot of information to put on the web yet. And then, we're getting a lot more info, so we're trying to communicate more and more and more. It's getting busier. We went with some logos, some bigger pictures, because the internet got faster, so we could send more, send more images down the pipe. So we thought we'd get fancy. And then this website, I think most of you probably remember this site. This was one we had for quite a while. We had the fancy rotator down here in the bottom where it went around and highlighted new things that we had going on. And then this is another tweak to that one. And that was it. So we look forward to meeting what your hopes and outlook is for this project. But I wanted to open it up in case there was anything that came to mind that we should be hitting for the website, or any feedback you'd like to give, or is there anything else you wanted to drop in there?
I want to thank the folks, Lauren, and the rest of the folks who are going to be serving on this committee. This is not something that was probably in their sights when they first joined the county, and they're taking on an added commitment to make sure our county is well represented and make sure their departments have the correct information out there. So we want to make sure they know that they're an important part of this process, and we cannot do it alone. And it shows the value they bring to the table. So our departments are very important in this.
So as you you hear the voice of the people out there that are using the website all the time, so please make sure if you do hear that, make sure you pass it on to these folks here so that we can incorporate that into our new site. And I guess, of course, the biggest thing is how do you get around and how do you find something quickly, so.
Three clicks is the conversation that we have a lot. So, we don't want people to have to click around and look for things. The search will definitely be an area that we're working on as well. Our search is good, but it can be better. So if you go there and you want to know election night results, you get that. But if you're looking for something a little more difficult to find, recycling versus, reuse or, other terms, this can be a little bit trickier to navigate to. So we're definitely working on that and realize that it needs work. So we appreciate you funding this and allowing us to continue to improve it.
Any other questions?
I think many of the iterations that you showed us step by step, you've won awards for, if I'm not mistaken, along the way. You guys have been incredibly successful in that department, and I have no doubt that you will continue on that track and do very well with this. So thank you for all your what you're getting ready to get into.
Thank you.
I guess the primary thought that ran through my mind throughout that entire presentation was, I thought we just finished a new web
It
page.
does feel that way, sir.
Yeah,
It was
but
5 years ago.
that's hard to
Yes.
believe. And I'm just figuring out how to use it.
Yes.
But no.
And to be honest, that is why I didn't jump out to we're going to have something new and different. I know the content management system doesn't sound like it's the most interesting thing or the most interesting piece of that. The goal of this project will not be to, hey, let's move everything around just because we're doing something different. I think that frustrates the public as much as anything. So if we can keep a similar look and feel and improve the use of the website, that's our goal.
Yeah, well, I think most people would be amazed at the vast amount of information that you have to work with and handle, and you absolutely cannot put everything on the front page.
I try.
Right, so, yeah. Thank you for that report.
Thank you.
Okay, we move. That sounded pretty nasty. So we move now to item 4.2 from Infrastructure and Asset Management, Emergency Medical Services Headquarters Project Update. And Mr. Billifer will talk with us about that one.
Thank you very much. Lauren, could you bring up the pictures? So the project is progressing. We've put all the GMPs in front of the board to sign off on them. So 1.5, and 2.0, we're rushing through as fast as we can on RFIs and submittals for the project, just to take, I wouldn't say take advantage of the market, but not let the market take advantage of us in terms of escalation on materials, things like generators and things like that. So big package things, we're putting through that RFI and submittal process immediately. So the design team has been working overtime, as well as myself, in terms of answering all of the construction manager at risk questions. These pictures are already a little bit dated, but they have finished all of their clearing, and our pad is graded out. You can see it when you drive by. You'll notice that the amount of rock on site has been decreasing. It's because it's been going elsewhere. We do have about 30 to 40 left, and we're going to, they're a specific size, and they'll be used to replace a knee-high wall that was on Union Cemetery. We value engineered that wall out, knowing that we would have a lot of this rock, and also just a kind of a little bit of a lineage to the site, if you will. So by taking out that brick knee-high wall, we save the money on that, and we'll kind of probably not half bury those large boulders, but probably a third to kind of give them some stability, and that'll help with stopping any vehicular traffic that got close to the building. So those are what, if you see anything on site, that's what's those are left for. Can you scroll through those pictures? So that kind of shows you the site that's actually standing on top of a very large dirt pile. Shows you one of our stormwater control measures right near the bus garage. So that's the kind of Union Cemeteries on your right. That shows you some of the standard size boulders that we are keeping on site. You can scroll down one. Kind of shows you you're standing on the other side of the stormwater control measure. And we have two very, very large stormwater control measures, or BMPs, basically ponds, on the site, one on Cabarrus, one on Union Cemetery. That shows one of our construction materials testers, so that's a third-party contractor that we use to verify that we're getting the different compaction on the soil. That's actually on the building pad right there. You can scroll down. That probably gives you a better idea of where the actual building is going to sit. And those boulders, most of those are moved right now. So like I said, the site changes on a daily basis. Can you scroll down? Yeah, and that just shows you them driving over, proof rolling. That was after one of our large rains. We were just making sure that it could handle the rain that came on it. So the site is progressing very well. Those are what we've stockpiled, and they were very good to work with a very unspecified description of what type of boulder I wanted saved. So that's a very vague description I gave them, and they came up with a lot of them. So they worked very well with us on that. You'll actually see a trailer and an actual construction trailer and a large container that'll start storing all of the electrical subcontractors' materials. Those will probably be on site by the end of the week, and they'll be on the backside towards the bus garage, if you will. So those are kind of our next big things to come up with. We are still challenged by rock that is in the ground, specifically on the Cabarrus Avenue side. So there is a stormwater control measure on Cabarrus Avenue that we have to get a very large pipe out of. And everywhere we turn, there's a lot of rock, and it's not that easy to blast, mainly because of the utilities, specifically the high-pressure gas line that's right there. So we're trying to find a different way around that and to not get into the DOT's realm, because then it's going to have to go through a lengthy review, which we're already dealing with on the Union Cemetery Cabarrus intersection side. So anytime you get into that review for having to go in a different direction and kind of get into their area, you've got to go through all that. So we are, no pun intended, in between a rock and a hard place in this. So we've actually done some extra probing to try to see if we can zigzag through some rocks. So that's one of the biggest challenges we have coming our way. And we've also obviously seen some change orders coming, and I'll be in front of the board next month to discuss some of those. And that really primarily deals with the utilities and the intersection of Union Cemetery and Cabarrus Avenue. And we are still trailing on time for the project, April 2023. We have not heard of any major delays, and that's probably due to us putting that steel order in when we did.
Okay, questions for Kyle?
Kyle, at some point, you probably told us about this, but we, as you know, we cover so many subjects.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming that we had probably a considerable amount more of rock allowance for this site, knowing what we were dealing with to start with.
We actually took an alternate for the rock. We took a $250,000 alternate for them to handle anything in the ground. That's like buying corn 2 years before it grows, so it's like a hedge fund. We looked at the geotechnical for that ground, and we figured that if we tried to do it by unit cost, we were going to get murdered. So we took the $250,000 alternate. So yes, that is how we were paying for that. Now that covers the actual civil, so the subcontractor that's doing the civil work, which is Padula, so the big red trucks, and you probably see them a lot. They do a lot of road work and DOT work. That covers that. We will have unit costs for subgrade work when it comes to some of the subcontractors dealing with MEP that have to go underground. So footers for a generator, electrical conduit out to a sign, things like that. That's not covered in that civil, because that person is just clearing out the pad of the building and the site. So yes, we will have unit costs coming back for that, but for the clear grading of the site, I assure you, we have saved our money by taking that. Did that answer your question? Because I kind of...
Well, yes, it did, because I mean, I knew we had to do something, because obviously it's a difficult site to start with, has been for anything that goes
Yeah.
there. And, but,
We avoided the unit cost by looking at the geotechnical report and seeing something, every time they make a boring and they couldn't go past a certain depth, it's a certain color. When the aerial shows up all one same color, I took the insurance policy for $250,000 and just took that.
thank you, Kyle.
Yes, sir.
I might add one thing to that, and that is, for those who are looking at this cost saying, well, why did you choose this site when there's an increased cost because of the rock? We owned this site. It met all our criteria for location. In fact, I think it's gonna be a fantastic location, not just for us, but as an entry point into the city of Concord as you're coming down Cabarrus Avenue. It's gonna be this beautiful new facility there, welcoming people as they're coming in. But it also, it reuses a site that we had in possession, and we couldn't find another site that met those needs like this one did. So I think overall, in balance, we never want to say Kyle and I are both a little superstitious, but we think we're really coming out well with it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jonathan. I think that the location is great, and like I said a while ago, the only real downside was the rock, but you made allowance for that, and we're turning a piece of property that anybody else that would develop it would probably spend a lot more than what we're gonna spend to develop it, and have a entity that will be there for 75, 80 years from now, and much better than where they're at now, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it was on the market for a lot of years, and we had a lot of people look at it and then back off because of the rock and other things, but.
Typically, we didn't get an email back once I sent them the geotechnical report.
Okay, any other questions on that item? Then we will move to 4.3, and Kyle will lead us in that discussion as well.
Great, thank you. Wanted to provide the board some information about the future location of the City of Concord tree at the Courthouse Public Plaza. So as you know, this year, it was at Rotary Square, but when the plaza opens up, the city had discussed putting it on the public plaza while we were in the Rotary Square planning meetings. And to do that, there would need to be some minor changes to the public plaza, specifically with landscaping. If you could scroll to the next one, might give a better idea. Can you like maximize or minimize that so I can get, yeah, sorry. If it's okay with the board, could I go up to the screen? Okay. So the discussion that we've had with the city first was they wanted to know where they could put the tree, and part of the problem is the fire lane that comes up to the building. So I'm going to kind of orient you all right now. We're sitting right here right now, okay? So your new entrance to the courthouse is right here where, and kind of Whataburger is right there, if that gives you an idea. This is a traffic rated fire lane, so you come off Union and they can turn in, there'd be bollards that you'd have to lower and come in with a fire lane. So obviously we cannot block the fire lane. And all of these green squares are planters and trees, and I don't mean just trees right in the ground, but in these large built-in paid place planters. And if you notice on your agendas, you can probably see it better than on the screen. Could you maximize that a little bit? It kind of shows, that's all right, that's right. It shows these planters increasing in size as you get to the public entrance. So if you recall, and mind you, Commissioner Shu had mentioned that, you guys hear a lot, but when we were designing this public plaza, we were designing it to get all the foot traffic to go to the front of that building. If you recall, when we designed and built the parking deck, it was that the parking deck was going to be where it was, and we were going to funnel everybody across Union. They were going to be able to see the shops and the retail, and then go right into the throat to get to the courthouse. So the entire design is narrows and thickens, so that as you're approaching the actual entrance to the courthouse, the planters are getting larger. They're telling you, and you're understanding that this is where I'm supposed to go. So why I mentioned that is that the tree, the City of Concord tree, has a very large diameter. It's about 20 feet. And trying to squeeze it in with everything we have there and stay out of the fire lane and still provide egress for where everyone wants to go became very difficult. So, you can minimize it now, Sean. We ended up finding one spot that we could put it, and that the city was agreeable to it, and they've already reviewed this, and now I'm coming to the board to make sure that you guys are okay with it. They're going to put it down here, which is pretty much where the intersection at Union is. And they will have to have an agreement with that owner right there, which that's Mr. Mueller, who owns that property. And then obviously, we will have to work with the city on the easements, because there'll have to be electricity and different things for it. We've worked how to anchor that tree down. So just so you know, where that tree used to be in the bicentennial parking lot, they used different guy wires from above. It wasn't ballasted from below like the one at Rotary Square. That's ballasted below with a barrel and water. So they've already investigated that. They're going to be able to ballast it so we won't have any guy wires and things like that. We will have to work with them. There'll have to be some different modifications we'll have to make to that area in terms of how much weight it can handle, and we will lose only one ornamental landscaping tree. So out of everything there, the least amount of change to the public plaza is that spot, and quite frankly, it's the only place I can actually put it into without making serious design changes to the plaza. So I'm here in front of the board to make sure that there's not any glaring issues with that before I move forward with the city and the actual folks building it to start to move forward to that. I'm going to sit back down unless anybody has any specific questions about that. Sir.
I'm gonna wait and sit down.
Okay. Yeah, no, get back up. Good call.
Just, this is, I think, pretty obvious. So you mentioned the structural component, and then we will have electrical conduit that's on us, or?
No, the city will put all that in, but we'll need an
Okay.
easement with them.
We're just providing maybe some project management and help and guidance.
Yes,
to get
there
it.
will be project management.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and space. But now just so that the board understands, the City of Concord Electric Department has worked very closely with us on that entire plaza that has nothing to do with the Christmas
Right,
tree at this point.
Right, and
Yeah.
because when we started, there was a lot of utilities running right through there that we've had to coordinate all the way through, yes. Is that an understatement?
It is?
Okay. So, well, nitpicking, it seems a little odd to have a tree right next to a wall, but I hear you loud and clear that sometimes there's just nowhere else to go.
There was also some thought that having it spill out into Union, since they plan on shutting Union down, that actually, while it looks like it's against a wall when you're in the plaza, necessarily as you're on Union, both sides of that building, you're getting more of a corner view of all of it. So are you able really to put more people around it to see it all? So when they kind of said it to me that way, I was like, well, that kind of makes sense, because I believe there's a perception that the plaza is going to be larger than it truly is. When you say plaza, people think, huge. You can fit just multiple fire trucks down it. It's when it's all said and done, it's not that large, So when we looked at it and kind of figured out the best places, I actually think that makes the most sense. And that's not just because it has the least amount of design changes on us. I really do think it makes the most sense.
Kyle, I think it's perfect myself. I mean, I've attended the one at the Bicentennial, we attended the one down in Rotary.
Yeah.
And the location obviously is good for both of those, but this is by far going to be better, because you're really going to have places for people to go that they can see what's going on. And I'm assuming, this is not part of our discussion, but I'm assuming the stage will be somewhere relatively, maybe across on the sidewalk of Union Street. I'm thinking, so you got Union North, Union South, and then the old means or the plaza, which is gathering places for people. In other words, different than what we had down here in the middle of the road.
Yes, I wouldn't want to speak for the City of Concord on where their stage
I
will go.
understand, but
I know it won't be on the plaza per se, or at least that hasn't been discussed with us, and they'd run into the same issues they have right there with the fire lane, which is probably the biggest issue. But yes, I think you're right, I think as the streetscaping project happens and as this happens, I think you're starting to see Union Street become more of that location for all of that. However that works out, I'll leave that up to the
Yeah,
city.
well, I'm very, very well pleased with it, and just as a little side note, I think we had some pretty good coverage around the county on Friday night. I think Blake and his family went out to the tree lighting in Harrisburg on Friday night. Patty and I went up to the Festival of Trees in Kannapolis, and it's a little bit of competition going on between Kannapolis and Concord and Harrisburg. And I'll be honest with you, I was really amazed at what's going on in Kannapolis. I mean, we may have a little catching up to do. I don't know where my Concord boys is at, but we may have to do a little catch up. So as far as the tree, I think it's perfect, Kyle, and appreciate you bringing that to us, just for us to look at, nothing else.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to make sure that you're all okay with that and kind of give it the internal okay before I start, like I said, I would have to remove one tree, so it does take a little bit of coordination.
I just had a question. After the Christmas tree lighting ceremony that we just were all at, there was a little bit of concern that because of where that was, and this is gonna be down further, you couldn't see the fireworks over the rooftops. So I don't know if that's something that, I know that that is in like a parking lot, is it the jurors' parking lot? That's usually where that's
Yeah.
staged.
So-
I just wanted to relay that to you, that
Yep.
that was a concern that people couldn't see over the rooftops.
And I think that will become a growing concern, because I think at some point you will see something go up around the bicentennial lot that might be a larger building. So I'm not, the city of Concord's been involved with this location, so I will bring that up to them and say, do you guys have are you comfortable with that? But I'm not sure how that, I guess what I'm trying to say is somewhere down the line, I'm not sure there's going to be a spot that you will be able to see the fireworks from downtown.
Yeah,
from being
I'm
on that
perfectly
street.
fine with the location, but I just wanted to bring that to
Okay.
that, that
Yeah,
to your attention, if you would
absolutely.
bring
I
that
will-
back to them.
I'll discuss that with the city.
So unrelated to the tree, but while we have this plan in front of us, where did we find a final resting place for the Charters of Freedom?
Yes. Can I go back up to the
Yes,
screen?
please. And I didn't mean to catch you off guard that, but while this is in front of us, I thought it might be helpful to see that.
And while he's walking up there, and Kyle will probably send this in about 5 minutes when he sits down. We actually have a diagram showing where that's located, but he'll give you the general.
Okay, yeah, that's fine, just in general. All right, okay. Yeah.
So you'll have flagpoles and then you'll have the Charters of Freedom. So to your back is the historic courthouse, it's right back to you. I'm gonna sit down.
Yes, because every time you stand up, our viewing audience cannot hear what you say.
Guys can put a mic on me.
Yeah. Okay,
But
any
yeah,
other questions?
Mr. Downs is working with the Charters of Freedom on those.
You're trying to, yeah. But I think what we've done is taken their design, modified it to match the building, as Kyle sent it back out to you. I showed it to a lot of you one day over at the Flywheel facility, actually, when the governor was there.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what, so it won't be the same colors as we saw with Freedom, it's gonna match the building itself.
Yeah, we couldn't make the 3 selections they have for the different type of exterior materials. It wasn't gonna work with that building, just with what you were looking at. There's so many different exterior materials in our building. It was gonna stand out like a sore thumb, so.
Well, I just couldn't remember exactly where we had zeroed in on, so yes, that's what I was after. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your input.
Okay, we move now to discussion items for action. First up is 5.1 from Cooperative Extension. We're glad to have Tracy LeCompte with us to talk about the 4-H Club archery access.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I also have our volunteer, Darren Purser, here. He is our certified rifle instructor for our 4-H shooting sports programs. Thanks for having us. As you know, with our 4-H program, Cabarrus County is one of the largest 4-H programs in the state, and we are very excited about all the things that we do within our 4-H program. 4-H is the nation's largest positive youth development education program, and we focus on building youth-adult partnerships through positive youth educational experiences, and we serve in 4 delivery modes. Clubs are one of those delivery modes. We currently have 17 active 4-H clubs in the county, and we have a very diverse group of 4-Hers that do all kinds of different things from different specialties, serving specialty populations and serving in a variety of different community clubs. One of the disciplines that we have not historically had a program in here in Cabarrus County is shooting sports. We did have a shooting sports program early in the 90s when our 4-H program was large and in charge and had lots of awesome things going on. And the National 4-H Shooting Sports Program is one of the leading programs that are supported for any of the target shooting sports in the country. So this has been a journey for the last couple years to get everybody on our ducks in a row to have this happen in Cabarrus County. But the biggest holdup that we have within our community is just having a safe place for our youth to practice. And many of smaller counties across the state do things in backyards and farmers' fields and things like that. And with the caliber of programs that we offer in Cabarrus County, that is just not what I would like to do with our program. And as the former 4-H agent in the county, so I started this program myself, but now as the county extension director, we're working to find a safe place for our youth to shoot or to practice. So our first item is the archery program, and we have been working with Active Living in Parks, with the Sheriff's Department, Sheriff's Office, with legal, with risk management. We've had lots of communications because obviously this is a topic that we want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that all concerns are brought to the table. And so what we are seeking is the 4-H club. We have a shooting sports program the program has already started. And by that I mean our clubs do not practice the hands-on activity necessarily at their club meeting. So a 4-H shooting sports club will meet once a month, and they will run a business meeting, much like your own. They go through different topics and activities and different things that are coming up within the 4-H program world, whatever that leadership aspect is, the different opportunities and activities that they do. It is led by youth, ran by youth, in the presence of adults through that youth-adult partnership. So the club is actually already meeting, and they're learning about all kinds of different things with shooting sports. There's lots of things that we do on site with no type of firearm present. We do a lot of things with hunter safety and hunter education, and a lot of different things on that. Darren is actually one of 3 that we have. We have a club leader who is not trained in a specific discipline, but is a fully trained 4-H volunteer in the youth-adult partnership aspect of it. So that is her specialty. And then we have a instructor in both archery, fully trained, and in rifle. North Carolina 4-H Shooting Sports does do those trainings. They are 3-day-long weekend trainings that are intense on making sure that everyone is safe and good to go in that. But we focus more on the development of that youth. We do that through the lens of shooting sports, but we also do that through the lens of horseback riding and gardening and sewing and STEM and robotics and archery and all those things that we do with all of our other clubs. So this club is treated very much just like the rest of them. We don't do horseback riding lessons at our club meetings. They do the club meeting, and if they want to do the lessons outside of that, they can do the lessons outside of that. So the lessons or the practice in this particular situation would be an actual shooting sports or target skills training practice that would happen outside of their standard club meeting. So normally the competitions are in August, May,
I know the one in all.
June, August, and October, I
Yeah.
believe, as they work their way through the progression. Again, I'm not the expert in the shooting sports part of it. My role is making sure that everyone is safe and trained and fully serving in their full capacity. And so within the program, then, as the kids ready themselves for competition, their practices and trainings will be more frequent as they get ready for competition. So currently, right now, with a competition being months away, they're not at a point where they need to practice currently. Our goal is to have them ready to be practicing by March with approval. So then they can practice towards the competitions that will be happening in late summer, early fall of 2022. So what we would like, and we've been working with you guys should have an access to the memorandum of understanding that we have worked through with all the departments. And we've been working through that memorandum of understanding for Camp TN Spencer, which currently has an archery range that then our instructors would work with the youth to be able to do that instructor training or do the practice with the youth on site at Camp TN Spencer. We've worked through the memorandum to have the county expectations with the archery range at Camp TN Spencer and the staff that are there and the 4-H volunteer aspect of it and everything that we do within our 4-H. The program will be open to any youth who are enrolled in 4-H, so they do have to be enrolled 4-H club members that would then be covered under our insurance through NC State University and the instructors as well. And then that practice times will have to be confirmed with the staff on site. And then with Londa's approval, we've gone through and their certified archery range masters, their staff will also be on site for any of those practices. But what we are looking at is that there will be a little bit more leniency in the fact, or a little bit different than if a Boy Scout troop came into the facility and just rented it or wanted to do that instruction, instruction would be led by the camp staff. We are asking for it to be led by our staff because in 4-H, that has to be led by a 4-H certified instructor. They have very similar, and actually the training that the staff members are going through is the same training that our people will also go through, but they also end up going through the 4-H volunteer program of it because we are not just training youth to be good target sports shooters, we are training youth to be the youth development people for the future. So we want that to be our focus within our 4-H youth development program. So I'm opening up for questions. I want your feedback on other things that maybe we've missed, thoughts, comments, other things that we need to make sure that we are talking about and discussing during this time.
Questions for Tracy?
Tracy, your students, you're saying it's limited to 25 students for the archery? Is that
So
right?
I have to look back at the numbers that we've looked at.
I think that's what I've seen.
We've not discussed a maximum on the actual club itself. At that time, we'll have no more than 6 youth that will approach the line at any time. So for logistics, we do a 1-to-6 ratio for our instructors to youth at any given moment. But that doesn't mean that there might be 24 kids. We're just doing 6 kids at a time coming through that. We currently have 1 instructor, but we have multiples that are waiting to go through the instruction. That only happens twice a year at our 4-H facilities across the state. So we have to patiently wait for those to come around to be able to certify.
Be like a waiting list.
Yes, absolutely. There'll be a cap on it. They will have to sign up individually for each one of the practice times, and that will be up to the instructors to be able to set that registration up for that time period.
Okay, and my last question is, can the students earn any type of accreditation for this? Is it just for their own knowledge to learn how to become good shooters, or can they earn some credentials of some sort that would help them with whatever else they wanted to pursue?
Yeah, so 4-H offers a variety of different opportunities, but if they're looking for a certification, we do not offer certifications in individual things. The club and the instructors might be able to do the different things through the Department of Wildlife and the different things there. We oftentimes will do the hunter safety course and that kind of thing with that relationship there. But what we do within 4-H is that we focus more on the youth development aspect of it, so they would be able to earn scholarships and different things based off of their activities within the 4-H program. But as part of the youth development part of it as well, we encourage the kids to build those life skills through different competitions that we have for 4-H project record books, where they're recording all of those things in there, and we put more value on those aspects of it. So, but That also being said, that at the district, state, and national level, if you put national shooting sports team on a 4-H national shooting sports team on your resume, it looks real good on paper.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Thank
So
you.
there's a lot of things that you can put on there. Yes, absolutely. So we, our youth here in Cabarrus County will have the opportunity to earn the right to serve on the North Carolina shooting sports team that will then also travel onto the national shooting sports competitions. Absolutely.
So it's archery at Camp Spencer.
Correct.
And where is the rifle?
So that's the next
Okay, so I'm jumping
agenda
ahead.
item.
Yeah, that's the next item.
Okay.
Yep, and you've sort of blended those two together a little bit.
Slightly.
But
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, well, go ahead.
Oh,
But I
and are
mean,
we ready to
shooting
go on to-
sports
we can
me
go on to the
is
other
a
one.
pretty wide thing, but I know
Absolutely.
we were talking about.
So this is specifically archery at Camp
At
Spencer.
Spencer, okay.
And asking for that permission to allow for our instructors to be the ones that would work with them at the range at Camp Spencer.
And Ms., I guess it's Hyatt Lisk is the.
Correct.
The.
Archery
the
instructor.
Archery instructor, okay.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Okay, and any other questions before we go on to the next part of this? Go ahead with item 5.2, 4-H Club access to Cabarrus County Sheriff's Office Training Range.
So the Sheriff's Office Training Range is where our rifle instructor comes in, so Darren's coming up with us for that one. But the concept is very similar. They'll still attend the class or the regular monthly meeting, those kinds of things, but Darren will be in charge of scheduling the practices that will happen out at the Sheriff's Office Training Range if we get approval and can move forward with that. So this memorandum of understanding is a little bit more strict because obviously we are allowing our 4-Hers access to a site that would not be traditionally something that they would have access to. So what we have worked through on this part of it is that any of the family members and any of the family members that are transporting the youth to that facility would go through our 4-H background check and be an approved 4-H volunteer. So we know who's coming onto the site and who's not. And the training range we've gone through multiple times with Lieutenant Klingel Smith and going through different things to make sure that everybody's where they're supposed to be and how it's going to be posted and laid out, and very specifically going through the needs, because that site is a very unique situation, that we will have to address those needs individually there. We worked to lay that all out on here. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to kind of go through any of those things there.
I'll just make a comment. I think that's fantastic. I mean, the fact that both of those things are Olympic sports, I mean, you know, you just never know when there's going to be a kid that shows up and has an unbelievable talent for something that maybe nobody knew they had. So to give them a safe, supervised place to do it and learn, I mean, that's fantastic as far as I'm concerned. So,
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think both the archery and the shooting sports, I think, is a great addition to the Cabarrus County, 4-H program. I think you'll see a lot of positive things come from that, a lot of interest.
Thank you. Yes, we definitely have a lot of interest, a lot of parents that are super excited about signing up to be 4-H volunteers because of it. So I think that also brings, a diverse group that will come to our program to grow that throughout the county and have different representation within our program as well.
any thought to adding sporting clays?
Yes, we would love a facility to be able to do such
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
We don't
okay.
have that
It's just-
capability right now.
Right, it's just hard to find, okay.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
two things too, and Tracy's done an excellent job of explaining everything that's there. Mr. Goldberg reviewed all of this as well. Risk management reviewed it all as well. And as you know, we have very little time to spare at the firing range for all of our public safety folks. So Chief and the Sheriff are back here as well, and they have reviewed it as well, along with Tracy and others, and blessed it. And so they think it's a
And the
good idea.
beautiful thing about children is that we work nights and weekends with them. And that generally is not the same time that the sheriff office needs to be out there. So they've been very gracious about working with us to make this happen. And everybody, it's been a lot of teamwork and a lot of people bringing different things to the table that we all want to make sure that everybody's in the best situation that we possibly can to bring this opportunity to Cabarrus County youth.
I guess the other thing too is that it's not open to the general public, so any of these participants have to be coming through the 4-H program in order for the sheriff to allow them on the range.
And I know that our 4-H agent position is currently open, so know that there will be a new person in that 4-H role as they come in, but they will be abreast of this when they are coming into the program, and we'll make sure that everybody is on board and making sure that they're up to date with everything here.
Yeah, sure.
Darren
Yes,
sat here
absolutely.
for 2 hours, we might as well let him say something. Can you tell, I mean, what's your background and training for being a rifle instructor?
Oh, well, you'll have to bear with me. Spoiler alert, she's way better at this. However, well, I went through the 4-H training at the weekend at the camp. And other than that, I was in the military for 4 years. I'm very familiar with rifles and the safety therein. I've also been a police officer in the Marine Corps. So I got to use pistols and shotguns, and I'm very familiar with the safety and possibilities that can happen therein. You know, and my major goal is just to help these kids in an activity that will encourage responsibility, civic engagement with the community, and you know, but above all, dealing with firearms and kids is safety. That's paramount to me, and will not be compromised.
And more importantly, he's a 4-H parent.
Yeah, that's it.
And his daughter just most recently graduated with our 4-H honors. So he's been in the program for a long time, and he and his wife are both avid supporters of our 4-H program. So,
And I'm on the board.
and he is on our foundation board as well, absolutely, and helps to support our 4-H program in lots of different ways. So
See,
thank you,
they
Dad.
hooked me with, come be on the board, it'll be fun, and then, don't you want to do this? I'm like, sure. And it just keeps
Absolutely.
rolling.
Yeah, Chief Bailey, do you have some comments about the impact on the firing range or the training facility?
Yeah, so when Tracy approached us, she was very open-ended as far as when she could use the range or when she wanted to use the range. So after all the participating agencies have used the range, she's taking any available dates that aren't being used. Now, obviously, with the range being out there as long as it has been, we do have homes and houses that are close by where we have over the years received complaints from neighbors as such as far as the noise. However, we've given her the guidelines that we would like to be followed. She's agreed to that. There will be one of our range masters on site with them while they're out there to ensure that everything's being done safely as far as the county side of things. And of course, they'll be watching the kids, I'm sure, as well, participating. And we did have some discussion about the overuse. That range does have a life expectancy, as everything does. But we feel like there'll be minimal impact on the range and the use of it. It's, I think, once or twice a year, 3 times a year at most, for an hour, 2 or 3. It was very minimal compared to law enforcement use, obviously. So we felt it was an acceptable thing to enter into.
Great.
Yep.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, we thank you very much.
Thank
Sounds
you.
like an exciting program.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, we move now to item 5.3 from Active Living in Parks, Fees and Charges. We're happy to have Londa Strong with us for that item. And Byron Hagler as well.
Yes, thank you. Byron was tasked with getting the fees and charges completed from the information from the staff again this year, and so that he's here to go over just the ones that have changed or any information. Commissioner Kiger was at the last out commission meeting when we went over this, so he may have some input.
Yes. Thank you all, and just a A reminder, these items are addressed during this time of year, so they can be in place during the entire calendar year. Fiscal year approval would split some of our activities, like our camps, our sports activities. So as Londa mentioned, this is just a summary. All that Lauren has up for you here is just a summary sheet, not the entire fees and charges document or the fees and charges policy, but just the additions, corrections, grammatical errors that we have seen. And I'm just going to go through those as we go down this document. You can see that we've just added some titles and removed some duplicates for the table of contents. As you go into miscellaneous equipment, we've edited quantities of items. And under page 6, we have requested to increase the rental fees for Helms Hall and the cabins, increasing Helms Hall reservation to $80 per half day, $160 for all day. For the reservation, we have not increased that charge in about 10 years now. Cabins increasing from $50 per night to $65 per night. Just looking at comparables, and then interior space for other facilities are just much higher. So we feel it's adequate and the right time to go ahead and increase that cost. For Frank List Park, you'll notice that we removed the arbor shelter, so that when the barn burned down, that was one of the site shelters that were removed because the new site is going to have a much larger footprint. That was going to be in the way. So removing that, and then we are anticipating our rental revenues cost for those facilities as they're built. So we wanted to increase without knowing right now the capacities for those particular sites, but we wanted to make it comparable of what our upstairs facility of the barn was like, because that will be comparable to what is provided in the future for the upstairs and the downstairs. So increasing those costs for what we project for those. We removed the lower level heat option because both options will be both upper and lower level, or upper and lower levels will be conditioned. And then the rest of the items there under Frank List Park are our open, larger shelters, and those are increasing to make sure that we are projecting the same price for capacity levels for our open shelters, and then also looking at comparable sites at other locations. So in reference, our 150-person capacity shelters, making sure that all of those are being charged the same for those items. Your softball field lining, adding in some verbiage for weekdays only, just because of staff availability, and then also increasing from $25 to $35, just for material cost increases. Paddle boats, kayaks, portion there, same content, just change of layout of the verbiage, just to make it more clear and easy to read. The same for the mini golf section, adjusting just the layout and the verbiage to be uniform. We did have an error there of showcasing March instead of April in that first section for 6 and over. That should have stated April through November. And then the next section on page 8, our bike rental fees and our bike rental late fees, removing that section just due to lack of demand. And it really came down to just the sizing needs for those particular bikes. You'll need older, or much larger and smaller sizes, and so we are utilizing those bikes instead for staff patrol. Road race and fundraiser walks and events, just correcting some grammatical errors. Page 9, fees and charges. We are expanding the time frame for notice for exclusive rentals. We just need a larger time frame to provide that option, and then also going into reducing the window of time that is provided. And changing the time frame for exclusive use to specifically a certain time frame, 5 to 8 instead of just after 5 p.m. And then going into the bulk ticket purchases for mini golf and paddle boats, changing that item to a unit cost instead of a range of tickets, and then what that range starts at to provide those reduced fees. The soccer field complex increasing from $40 2-hour minimum use to $50 per hour, and then increasing from $250 to $300 per field for an 8-hour day, just increasing just due to maintenance expenses increasing. Our ball field rental policy, providing a single-day rental for the 4 fields at $600, and then also increasing our 2-day rental option from $600 to $750 for that option. Costs us, the preparation's the same, so just providing a single-day use if they desire to. Our programs and fees under the activity, we are adding in our archery range for programs, camps, tournaments, since we have the new archery range facility, providing a fee-based window there. And then just reiterating under the activity for adult softball or adult leagues, we are just reiterating what our verbiage states in the policy, that our fees are based on 100% recovery of our direct cost. And you'll see that we are recommending to take out all the verbiage breaking out the adult leagues and just putting in a range that is stating just adult sports leagues. Field trips, educational programs. The Junior Ranger program is extremely successful. We have not increased that cost in several years, and we are increasing just to cover our material cost for that program to $2 per student from $3, and then also adjusting the number of on-site field trips versus in-person classroom visits.
$4.
Yes, $4 per student versus originally $2 per student. And then our road race activities, increasing our per-person fees for the 5K from $20 to $25, the individual from $8 to $10, the team or groups from $15 to $18, the family registration going from $65 to $80 per family, and then we have increased the late fee I left out for the 5K from $23 to $30, and the individual fun run walk from $10 to $13, and just cover a cost for material increases for those road races, and for the chip timing addition that we have for those road races. And I know that was a whole lot, but minimal changes throughout the document, and I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you may have for the fees and charges.
One thing that I would add on any of the buildings, indoor buildings, not any of the shelters, we've had additional cleaning costs with COVID, the materials that we've bought and the things that had to go on. So that was one of the reasons that we increased with, especially on the cabin side.
I just have one quick question, guys, and I know you guys are the best at this, obviously, but do we, for the most part, do we try to do cost recovery on these rental fees? We're not for profit on this. It's based on cost.
Correct.
To provide the service,
Correct.
quality of life service.
Yeah, probably in many times it's probably less than
Yes.
cost. Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
I
we
mean,
try
I
to
know there's
keep
a
it
lot
as-
goes into it, because the maintenance of the fields, the maintenance of the buildings, and ongoing repairs and stuff. I know Kyle brings stuff to us all of the time, for parking improvements. All of that stuff does cost money. And a lot of times the viewing audience, they don't understand, why do you charge so much? And I just wanted to try to help clarify that there are a tremendous amount of cost to keep these facilities available to the public for the citizens' use. And so you have to stay on top of it, because costs are definitely going up. And so if you hadn't had an increase in 10 years, it's surely time.
And with the athletic fields, they're in better shape than they've been in years and years. And that's with infrastructure and asset management, to having the programs that they've got set up, because they're used a lot. And we have to make sure they're shut down at certain times so that it's not used 12 months out of the year. And that's very expensive with what IM does in keeping those fields looking the way that they do.
Absolutely. And we're surely in capable hands. Thank you both.
Okay, additional questions for Byron or Londa on fees?
Don't have a question. I noticed on page 7, ULVL, there's no increase, and I just wanted to make sure that was correct. It says 150 to 300, and there's a line thrown through it, and it's the same price next to it.
That is a great point. That is correct. That one should not have been highlighted it was a mimic charge instead of an actual fee change. Thank you.
Didn't you change this? Yeah.
That may be
That's
the
probably
actual
why it's
case.
in there.
Is the actual acronym is what ended up getting changed on that. We were
Okay.
laughing about that earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to
Sorry.
make sure
Yes.
that if it was supposed to be changed, it wasn't, noted here.
Thank you. The price change is accurate at what it's stating at 150. That's not actually a change. It was just a change to the actual acronym for that
Perfect.
location. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification.
Sure.
Well, since we did mention acronyms earlier, I was gonna say you deserve an award because I don't know what any of those mean.
L lower level.
And that's okay.
UL upper level. We try to make
Okay.
it simple.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we will move to item 5.4, also from Active Living in Parks, part of grant waiver request.
As you all hopefully remember, a few months ago, probably April, we came to you all asking to apply for a Park and Recreation Trust Fund grant to purchase 13.795 acres adjacent to Rob Wallace Park. The property owner has agreed that they wanted to sell that property to us. Jonathan, Mr. Marshall had worked with their realtor off and on for a while, probably ever since we've had that park. And they finally set a price. That's why we applied for the Partif grant. We did not make the first cut because there was a smaller amount of money in the park fund than, well, more than they've had recently, but not enough to fund everyone that applied. I did receive an email a couple of weeks ago from the Recreation Resource Services, is who our liaison is with the Park Service, letting us know that if the state budget was approved as recommended, they would have enough money to fund most of the grant applications through this process. So we've still got a chance. They met in late November, and they'll make their decision hopefully by the end of December. They're looking at the remaining applications and setting their criteria. They haven't decided how they want to distribute the rest of the money. So we have a chance, but we don't really know. The property owner just indicated that they wanted to make the sale prior to January 1, 2022. So I was like, oh, we definitely won't have the money by then. However, there's a waiver process that you can go through, and we did that. Mr. Downs sent the letter in. He got a letter back last week or a week before indicating that the waiver was approved, and all that means is we can go ahead and purchase that property now. When our grant gets approved, they won't hold anything against us. We will not, even though that property will be in our name, that will not be anything to keep us from getting the grant. So if we purchase that now and we get funded in January, we'll get that money back. Doesn't give us priority. It just tells us that we can go ahead and purchase that and hope that we get the grant. So we didn't have $100,000 sitting in our budget anywhere, but Mr. Marshall spoke with Mr. Harris, and it's like, let's take that out of the general fund. So there was a budget amendment attached to that request. And also attached to that request is that we would like to have approval tonight so that we can hopefully purchase that before January 1st. And we'll hopefully get the grant. So there's a lot of hopes in here, a lot of fingers crossed, because, we just don't know at this point. We're kind of stuck in the middle.
Londa, can you remind us of the location of this parcel? I can't remember.
This is on if you were driving in to the park and you go down the hill where that first overflow parking lot is, the gravel parking
right.
lot, to the left, it's 13 acres on the
Okay.
left side of that property, where that sewer line, if you remember where that
Right.
sewer
Oh,
line
yeah, I
there.
do.
Jonathan can probably tell you exactly.
Probably the best way to describe it is when you go into the park and the three large oak trees, kind of at the highest point in the
Right.
park, this is directly adjacent to it. So it's the hardwoods, as you're getting to those three trees, it's all the hardwoods to your north, which is your left there.
Right.
So it's a parcel that oddly was purchased by I believe it was the father or grandfather of the current owners, for timbering, but it hasn't been timbered. So it has a lot of very mature hardwoods going all the way down to Muddy Creek. And so the borderline would be Muddy Creek It does include the sewer easement, so ultimately they would need access back to that sewer easement, but that's easy enough to do.
That property, excuse me, that property appraised for over $300,000, and they agreed to sell it to us for $100,000 at a reduced rate, so we used that as our match with the Partif, and so actually there's no money out of our pocket if we get that grant.
Any insight on why that's the case?
I'm sorry?
Why it appraised for that amount, why they're selling it for the amount they are?
Well-
Yeah, the remainder of the property, this is part of a larger parcel, so the remainder of the property fronts on Bethel School Road, and it is on the market for residential development. And they had a buyer, as I heard, that had not closed. So I think part of that is that there's certainly, it's been in the family a long time, so there will be capital gains. So I'm not a tax expert, Mr. Cook, right? Yeah, but I think there are some advantages to them for the value they're donating to us.
They're also wanting to put a bluebird trail on that piece of property with them paying for these bronze bluebirds and have a little story walk, scavenger hunt out of, with the bluebird trail in memory of one of their nephews. And they have commissioned an artist, and I think he's in California, to make these.
Chairman, if there's no further discussion on it, would make the motion that we suspend the rules and go ahead and vote on it.
Okay, do I hear a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. That motion passes. And so I would now entertain a motion.
Mr.
Two.
Chairman, I'll make a
Go.
motion to approve the purchase of the 13.795 acre parcel adjacent to Rob Wallace Park for $100,000 with funding from the fund balance account, and adopt the budget amendment, subject to review by the county attorney.
I'll second.
Doesn't he have to review any property purchase? Maybe that's overkill, but it seems like we usually have that as part of the motion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Kiger, a second by Commissioner Strang. Any discussion on that item? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much.
If you can find some more pieces of property for 1/3 the appraised value, let us know.
Will do.
Okay, we move now to item 5.5, and that is appointment to boards and committees. All of you have received this information in advance, and we have several different ones. Does anyone have any questions or comments about those items before they would go on our consent agenda? All righty, hearing none, we will move to item 5.6. And that is commissioner appointments for 2022. You see a list of those attached to your agenda as well. Those are the commissioner, actually, of our board appointments to various boards and committees, and liaisons to municipalities. I know that there was one item that was included in the previous board. I think Commissioner Strang had resigned from the Mental Health Advisory Board due to a schedule
Work
conflict.
conflict. Yeah, work conflict.
So that we do have an opening there if anybody is interested in serving. I attend all of those meetings sort of as the moderator, but am not really the official appointment. So that's something that is open. As far as our other appointments, very much like we have done in previous years, we have opened the opportunity if anybody wants to switch an appointment with someone else, or if you feel like you'd like to have some exposure in a different area. That's a discussion that we can have now and can continue later on as well. Did you have something, Commissioner?
Well, yeah, I was going to mention that since we're no longer affiliated with Cardinal Innovations, I don't think we'll have a need for that particular liaison position with the Cardinal Innovations Advisory Committee.
That
Commissioner
you,
Strang was on, took my place on that, but since we're not affiliated with them, I don't know, I would I guess there's not gonna be a Cardinal Innovation, so therefore there won't be a advisory committee.
yeah, I think we can just delete that one.
Yeah,
And of
just
course,
delete
we
that one
did
out.
make an appointment to the partners
Right.
board.
Right,
Several meetings ago.
yeah, okay, so that's good for that.
Yeah, yeah, so I'm sure Lauren will update that.
This was
that
just
item.
last year's
Yeah.
Yeah,
list.
that's all
And
I had.
so if, you know, if anybody has anything they want to say now that they want to switch, you can, or if you want to look that over and come back later, we can handle that either way.
Yeah, just one thing, the very first one, that ACT Work Ready, they don't meet anymore. I don't know if we've officially dissolved them or not, but I think the ACT, the Work Ready program, yeah, they haven't met in over a year probably, so let me do some follow-up on that, and I'll let you know, but, and if there's something similar that replaced it, and they're just calling it something different, I'll let you know that as well, so.
Okay, any other questions on that item? We can revisit that at any time. But it will go on our consent agenda to carry over to next year, and then we can always edit it as needed. Okay, next up is item 5.7, ordinance implementing state criminal justice reforms, and David Goldberg's going to talk with us about that one.
Good evening, Commissioners. So, a few weeks ago, the General Assembly enacted and the Governor signed a very omnibus criminal justice reform package. Hundreds of pages, a lot of hard-fought discussions, covers a widespread part of our criminal justice system in the state. One aspect of it, Part 13, deals with the decriminalization of certain ordinances. So under the law right now, or actually previously up until December 1st, any ordinance, the default penalty for any violation of a municipal or county ordinance was a Class 3 misdemeanor, $50 with a $50 fine, and then the ordinances could increase that up to $500. And that was really the standard. And that applied to pretty much every ordinance on our books. And if there was nothing said in an individual part of the Code of Ordinances, it defaulted to this $500 fine, Class 3 misdemeanor. And that's the way it worked. So as part of this law, the default has now changed. So now under the law, an ordinance is not subject to criminal penalty unless the ordinance itself specifically says so on an individual section-by-section basis. So where right now, some of our ordinances say that, some don't, but ultimately they all default back to our County Code Section 1-7, and it says Class 3 misdemeanor, $500 fine unless otherwise indicated. That is no longer acceptable. So under that status, we now need to take that kind of broad default that covers throughout the entire code, and we need to bring that to a degree into every single criminalized, prohibited, or required act that we want to maintain criminalization of. The other thing to keep in mind is there's also certain kinds of ordinances that are no longer, cannot be criminalized at all now. Mostly they have to do with planning and development ordinances, so the zoning ordinance. We don't use it as a tool, but we could have ticketed people for a Class 3 misdemeanor if they violated a zoning or building code ordinance. We can't do that anymore except for ordinances related to unsafe buildings. Ordinances adopted pursuant to regulating and licensing businesses or trades are decriminalized. Registration of mobile homes and house trailers. Stream clearing programs are decriminalized. Regulation of outdoor advertising. Limitations on solar collectors, and then limitations on cisterns and rain barrels, and then also ordinances regulating trees. So those are now those cannot be criminalized. Those cannot be subject to criminal penalty. So the alternative that we have to create, if you have something on the books, it's not a law unless you have a way of enforcing it. There's really two tools. So one is we have right now, which is the ability to go to court and ask for the court to enjoin or to stop whatever conduct is breaking our ordinance. And that's a pretty lengthy process, versus writing a ticket and kind of sending it to the process. The other option that we don't necessarily have as a broad spring on the books right now, but it will be appropriate to talk about, is the availability of a civil monetary penalty. So in the event, as an alternative to criminalization of ordinances, but also additional tool to enforce them, even if we can do a criminal ticket. Essentially, it's a bill. Essentially, if someone violates it, we send them a civil citation, and it is enforceable essentially as a debt. And we would go to court to collect it, small claims if we wanted to. You can't be arrested for it. You can't be sent, there's no debtor's prisons or anything like that. But it does have some meat to it. So before you is the attempt, at least my attempt and the staff's attempt, to implement the requirements of this. The idea that we have before you is to maintain the status quo as much as possible. If something is criminalized right now, we took the steps necessary to maintain that criminalization as a Class 3 misdemeanor, unless otherwise it is. We want to maintain the status quo that was in the books prior to the enactment of this law. But there are instances where it's no longer lawful to criminalize those acts, and we've removed those. And we've also created a default civil monetary penalty that applies to any violation of any ordinances. I believe we've set it at $100, which is considered kind of the norm, and that would be, achievable. But there's no hard limit on that. 100 is kind of the norm. So again, if you go through the ordinance, it is very long, and you'll see the gist of it in the sense that every single time there is some sort of a prohibition or requirement of the public, it is now added in one way or the other to a violation of section is punishable as a misdemeanor. And then once we say that, it defaults back to section 1-7 that sets the penalty at $500 in that Class 3 misdemeanor where appropriate. Overall, I don't think this is going to change the operations. We don't write a lot of tickets, and Chief can talk to that as far as the ordinances goes. It also does not change. There are other laws that criminalize ordinances separate and apart from the general authority. So, for instance, the floodplain management ordinance is separately criminalized. That's not effective. Also, some certain building permits are separately criminalized, separate and apart from our authority to do it. So those maintain the status quo. I will say the last thing is this is designed to maintain the status quo. I think if you go through this, you will see that we are due for modernization in our ordinances as a broad spectrum, chapter by chapter. Some of these aspects probably don't reflect the way we operate as a county or reflect our expectations in the community, or may not be a best practice as far as how these things should work, or just need to be updated based on the changes in state laws and understanding of those laws. I think this is a good kind of dabbing into the larger conversations that's probably appropriate as we go forward. But this is designed to maintain the status quo. I've consulted briefly with Chief Bailey. I won't speak for him whether he approves or supports this in any way, but it does intend to maintain the status quo. And we are in consultation with the DA's office. There's one little tidbit we're still working on, the massage parlors, that we haven't had a chance to rectify yet between now and when this comes up for a vote in 2 weeks, but we'll have a firm answer by then. If you have any questions or talk through, I'm happy to be at your disposal.
David, since this is a state criminal reform, this that you recommended here, the ordinance, does this parallel with what other counties are doing to make the criminal justice reform?
So this was the one that beat us to it. We're pretty ahead of the curve on some of these, is Chatham County, which is a very reputable county attorney, city attorney. County attorney. He used to be the Charlotte city attorney for a long time. And so this is his recommendation, this is the consensus. Unfortunately, the statute is vague in some ways. For instance, it refers to individual, specifying each ordinance. We don't really have ordinances, we have a code.
Right.
And so, ordinance is kind of a vague term. So we had to interpret that to being the section by section rather than ordinance by ordinance. That's the safer sort. We've consulted the School of Government as well, the League of Municipalities, the Sheriff's Association. Some of this is not gonna be ironclad until it goes to court and a judge figures this out. But I think this is the best appropriate way to maintain the status quo, to allow us for you, if it is your pleasure, to look at more fulsome modernization of this code of ordinances.
I agree, and it's actually, it wasn't planned this way, but it's just like the gun ordinance that we'll be talking about in a little while, 1967. So it's definitely one of many that are more than likely outdated, and so this is sort of falling right in place, really.
I think it's staff's recommendation that we need to look at this as a very strategic, comprehensive process to kind of define what is the best practice when it comes to local ordinances and regulations in the community, help you develop your understandings of what your expectations are as a board, and then use that kind of framework to have those kind of ordinance by ordinance conversations. And that's something we can't make that decision for you, but we want to help frame that in a organized way to minimize stresses in the community and stresses on you. Changing ordinances is also very costly. The way our services work, right now, it can be several $100s each time we make any change, if not thousands sometimes, depending on.
Well, we can negotiate that, David, that's no problem.
Well, so we do need to be, we want to be mindful of that and make sure we're doing it in an efficient way. And whether that's the best, we don't want to change providers or anything before we start making big changes.
We had to bring this all in line with what the state said we had to do. So as a matter of policy, we've really never used the criminal sanction for a violation of ordinances. We've always used the civil methods that were available to us. So in terms of this making some sort of big change day to day, it won't make any change. But we just had to bring it in line with what the state said we had to have in our ordinance.
So this also does not change the planning and zoning ordinance, which is separate. The development ordinance is separate from this. Almost all of that is decriminalized, but that's kind of a separate process that will come forward to you.
Additional questions or comments? Thank you, sir. Okay, we move now to item 5.8, resolution establishing the Board of Commissioners 2022 meeting schedule. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Gives all the dates of our work sessions and regular meetings for the upcoming year, as well as our budget workshops and planning meetings in the early portion of the year. Obviously, from time to time, these can be amended if needed. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that item? Okay, then we will move to item 5.9, appropriate fund balance for Cabarrus Dream Center, and we will let Rodney Harris start off that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we're going to be joined by Gwen Stowers and Doug Stafford, if they can come up to the microphones. They've hung in there for 2.5 hours now.
In those comfortable chairs.
In those, yeah, very comfortable chairs. So I'm going to let them do most of the talking for this particular agenda item. And there's basically two things that I'm going to ask that they do real quick. And one is just to let the public know what the Dream Center is so that they are aware. And then the second is to talk about the two specific projects that this item would fund related to human trafficking and behavioral health. So I will turn it over to Doug and Gwen.
We talk in tandem.
Yeah, we do. Well, I'll let Gwen do most of the talking, but as you all know, I've been involved with the Dream Center now for quite some time, and I'll let Gwen talk to you specifically about the different ministries and the agencies that are involved with the Dream Center, but suffice it to say that it is a unique facility in that it blends both ministry partners, partners that are nonprofits or para-ministry partners that deal with everything from homelessness to hunger to restoration of people who've been involved with substance abuse. But it also has a public component too, because we have Cabarrus Health Alliance with some of their services that are there housed in the Dream Center, as well as the folks at Human Services here in the county. So I'll let Gwen tell you a little bit more about it, but this is a Dream Center dream that has been discussed now for probably 5 or 6 years.
No, not quite that long.
Well, long time.
A long time, yeah, a long time.
Anyway.
Well, it originally, I don't want to go into too many details, but originally started being discussed about 20 years ago, to be quite frank. Their Dream Centers are nationally known. They were formed out of Los Angeles 26, almost 27 years ago. They started out being housing for veterans who had addiction problems. And it expanded to also provide housing for single mothers and provide housing for human trafficking survivors. There are now over 140 Dream Centers throughout the nation. So there are some international ones as well. And they have kind of evolved into where they're no longer completely just residential housing. We actually are the very first Dream Center that we are aware of that houses both government agencies, nonprofit agencies, and ministry agencies all under one roof. There was an initiative, as many of you may know, in 2008 where we were trying to have nonprofits under one roof here in Cabarrus County, and when the recession came, that kind of went on the back burner. And so I was invited through CCM to be part of a steering committee that was discussing this very issue, the best way to help clients come out of poverty into prosperity, and this one under one roof concept. And so the one element of that was missing was space to be able to do that. And it just so happened that we had the space. And so we offered that space to DHS. CHA was already in that space. We offered the space to CCM, Present Age Ministries. We already had a food pantry in that space. And so we saw this as being an opportunity to provide a lot of needed services to our community in one location. We're also directly on the bus line, which makes it even more appealing to be in this location. And so we started having the conversations probably about 4 years ago with those in our community. And we have maybe not done the best job of getting the word out there, but we have gotten the word out there. And we started needing to do some fundraising in order to bring the space up to what our dream for it would be. And we, with the help of Mr. Stafford here, and then we raised, well, a significant amount of money to get us in there. And so we were able to bring CCM in. We had a grand opening in April, and Cooperative Christian Ministries is already in there with some of their resource services. Cabarrus Health Alliance has expanded and brought in WIC. The Department of Human Services has brought in some of their services as well.
Gate pregnancy.
Gate Pregnancy was already there, and they have expanded. They've gone from a 1,500 square foot space to a 3,000 square foot space, and they'll be opening up this month. I think they'll be having their grand opening. And we also, during the process that was not part of our original financial plan, was the addition of space for behavioral health services and adult and teen challenge, which will be an intake space for men and women in need of recovery from addiction. And they will be able to come through there, and if it's not something that Adult and Teen Challenge can place them in immediately, they will find the services for them to be placed. I will tell you that Multiply Church is very, very committed to addiction recovery because we are affiliated strongly with them. And we have, prior to COVID, had made arrangements with the Sheriff's Department to even fund some of those coming out of the jail who were interested in going into recovery. And we are still committed to that. Anyway, there's so much more. I don't know exactly what I need to share with you, but thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
A couple of key points that Gwen made. As you all know, we're blessed to be in Cabarrus County. It's probably well, in my opinion, it's probably the most prosperous county from a global perspective in the state of North Carolina. And when you're in a prosperous county like we're in, it doesn't matter whether you're in Harrisburg or Kannapolis or Concord or Midland or Mount Pleasant or just living out in the county, we're truly blessed. But with those blessings come the need, though, to help people who are in desperate need. And as you know, with prosperity and growth comes a growth in people who are either underserved or who have serious problems. They're in crisis, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's hunger, whether it's a situation where they just made some bad decisions or have had bad life experiences. They need help literally getting lifted up so they can get back and be a productive member of our society. There's two key components of the Dream Center that we need to complete, and that's precisely what this grant will address. One is, as you heard Gwen talk about behavioral health, the pandemic has made that more of a reality than I think any of us could have ever imagined, with everything from all the lockdowns, if you want to call it that, staying in place, the social distancing, wearing of the masks, the fact that so many people weren't able to do many of the things that they were accustomed to being able to do, and you had a lot of people who were out of work and not able to support themselves. Mental health has become a real issue, and there's a demand, as you know, and a need for those mental health services. So we have that particular section of the Dream Center that needs to be finished out so that we can get the counselors in there and get them working out of the Dream Center. And the second area, which is something none of us like to talk about, is human trafficking. You know, you think in a place like Cabarrus County we don't have that problem. Unfortunately, because we're close to a large metropolitan area, Charlotte, which is a blessing in many respects, but with that blessing comes issues like human trafficking. And Cabarrus County, unfortunately, has to deal with that and address that. And we have an organization called Present Age Ministries. That's their sole focus, is dealing with human trafficking and bringing those folks in that have been rescued and getting them through a recovery process so they can get their lives back. So that's the other space. We have the space created because of all the money we've raised. Multiply Church put a lot of money in, but also we had individuals and companies contributing money, and we've actually created the space. It's on the second level above where Cooperative Christian Ministries, their facility currently is, but we need to finish that out. And that's exactly the request tonight, and I think I would be thrilled to answer any questions. And I know Gwen can answer a lot more than I can because she's smarter than I am, and that's the truth.
And just real quick, in case you have this question around why we're not recommending using the American Rescue Plan funding, where they are with this particular project or these projects, because of the procurement requirements that come along with that federal money, they would run afoul of that, and we would be ending up having to repay the money down the road. So that's why we're recommending fund balance be used for this.
I wanted to say, Doug, you know, you and Gwen, I came out there. It's been quite a while, seemed like, you know, and toured. I don't know who else has toured the Dream Center, but I was very impressed with what you got going on out there, the different services to help people. And you can't help but think about a certain scripture we talk about, to whom much is given, much is required. In Cabarrus County, you know, I know that things aren't just given to us. We have to earn it, but I think there's a lot required of us. And so this is a good thing for Cabarrus County. It's a good thing for the residents that are challenged for whatever reason. And like you said, teen trafficking is a big issue. Teen pregnancy, all the different things that you guys are hitting on at the Dream Center. And I remember that space, you showed me that space that you've got the stairwell going up there, and you've got the ceiling finished, but they don't have the other part. And so this is a good thing. I'm glad to see you get it worked out where that we can do this. Thank you.
Hey, other questions or comments?
I think if you ask Karen Calhoun, she is very excited out there. In fact, if they free up some more space, we want to be first in line. And because it is doing such good things out there.
Yeah.
And as we look, especially as we look to vacate where we are and start moving our human services departments to new locations, we definitely want a larger footprint at the Dream Center.
I serve on the board, DHS board with Karen Calhoun, and yes, I would echo that she would be thrilled to see that, and have also toured the facility, and I think this is one of those jewels in our crown that many counties would be jealous of, that we have the opportunity to make that difference here. So thank you guys for what you do, and I would be excited to have the opportunity to see it come to fruition.
Wanted to say just one more quick thing. We talk about it, we didn't say where it's at, though. So we need to let the viewing audience know where the Dream Center is. And Doug, you want to expound on that, or Gwen, you guys are there,
So the Cabarrus Dream Center is located in the village. It's not a shopping center. Well, it is a shopping center a little bit, but it's located in the village, which is on Highway 29, and Cabarrus Avenue runs right into that. So it's where many of you may remember the old Walmart was, and was it Peoples that was there, and Winn-Dixie? But the Dream Center itself is where Winn-Dixie used to be. And it was just a space that when Multiply Church purchased the village, it was a space that was originally designated for community service and just kind of sat empty for quite some time, except Cabarrus Health Alliance was in there with their dental services. And otherwise, we eventually, about 7 years ago, moved our food pantry there. And it does look like a shopping center, a grocery store. And but it sat empty. And so when our new senior pastor was voted in 6 years ago now, Pastor Doug Witherup, he came to me and asked me if we could revisit the dream of the Dream Center being in that space. And so that's what we started doing, and we're at this point. Am I allowed to deviate away from that conversation just a moment? I don't know the protocol here. But
Absolutely, feel free.
But I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Downs. He was the very first person who came to the Dream Center before it looked like anything. And I just shared my vision, and he grabbed hold of it. And I want to thank you for that. And the rest of you, I don't know how much encouragement you get, but I sit here and watch you and just am so grateful for each one of you. I wouldn't want to sit in your chair. I would not. But I have said it so many times, and I just want to say it to your faces. Thank you so much for serving our community in such an excellent way. No matter what decision you make on this, I don't want that to be, but I mean, you serve us so excellently, and I just have to tell you, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll just wrap up by saying that the Dream Center truly is a dream, and the amount of collaboration that occurs there, I think, is a model for communities everywhere. You're talking about faith-based, government, private industry, and on and on. And so the request that you're making tonight is no small amount of money, but if you look at the impact that it makes, and if you look at what the potential cost to taxpayers is to try to duplicate those services, it's not it's a good deal. It's a very good deal. And I was, served on that steering committee for that under one roof group back in those days in 2008, I guess it was, and we talked about, we talked about the people that need these services are often the people that are challenged with transportation opportunities, and to send them around from here and be referred to here to get those services together is just tremendous. And certainly all of us on this board have had many discussions about the substance use and how that impacts our community, and certainly the opioid issue. We've had many discussions about mental health, and during this past year have invested a tremendous amount of time in trying to improve mental health services in Cabarrus County, and we're now working on another project, hopefully, to come to fruition. So this is, in my opinion, fits perfectly within our goals and objectives. And so thank you for what you've done. I don't think there are too many communities around that would have a partner like we have been able to have to cause those things to happen. So, it's truly thank you for your work, and Doug, you as a volunteer, and I mean, it makes a tremendous impact on the quality of life. That's one of the reasons that Cabarrus County is the third fastest growing county in the state of North Carolina. I mean, people want to be here. And so thank you for all the contributions to that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for being with us
Appreciate you very
tonight.
much. Thank you.
And we will move now to item 5.10, easement request at C.C. Griffin Middle School. And Jonathan will talk with us about that one.
Just some very quick history. If you're familiar with C.C. Griffin Middle School and Patriots Elementary School, both off Rocky River Road, and the Mills at Rocky River Community. When the city of Concord originally approved the zoning some more than 20 years ago for that development, there was a school site included with it. We did have to purchase a little bit, but a majority of that was donated, and then we bought the second school site as part of our agreement, because it was very much a less than market exchange. To get those school sites, we agreed that a sewer easement would run through these parcels to serve some other parts of the development. There is a parcel that fronts on Rocky River, and this, I think it's page 116, Lauren. There's a parcel that's under development now, Green Street land, that's towards the front, and you can see more from the vicinity map. It's that shaded area that fronts on Rocky River, but as they were developing it, what they discovered is that there is an 11-foot gap between that parcel and the sewer easement. So this really just fulfills that agreement we had early on, that to provide sewer service to these parcels, we would have these easements through the school site. The schools, Tim Lauder and Brian Cohn, have both reviewed this. There is no real issue with this. It's just a matter of correcting this and adding this small amount of easement.
Questions for Jonathan?
Jonathan, do we pay for that, or does the developer pays for that 11-foot construction to hook onto the?
Because this is such a small easement, and we had that responsibility, and we initially acquired the sites, I had not asked for a payment for this. It would be a negligible amount anyway.
Okay.
But they are paying for all the construction. There's a
Okay.
sewer line in that main 30-foot easement that was existing,
Right.
and they're connecting to that. So all the other infrastructure improvements are at the developer expense.
Right, okay, good.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. And we will move to item 5.11, appropriation of American Rescue Plan funding to Families First Incorporated, and Rodney Harris. will
So
have
I'm
that.
joined by Jeannie Sherrill and Beth Hamilton. They have made it almost 3 hours, so thank you for your patience. Karen wanted to be here, but she couldn't be. This is an item that she thinks is vitally important for our community, so I'll let them speak about the service in particular. This would be coming from our American Rescue Plan dollars. It is replacing revenue that they lost from the state of North Carolina when they didn't get that grant renewed for this year. So I'll go ahead and let you all speak to the program itself real quick.
Well, Jeannie's our director. I'm the program manager for the, it's called the Visitation Station. It is a supervised visitation program that we run out of Rowan County and Cabarrus County. We were brought to Cabarrus County in 2018, and like he mentioned, we were funded by Governor's Crime Commission till now, and they've decided with COVID and everything, their funds went elsewhere. So we've been struggling to continue this service, and we are a resource for the court system and the Department of Human Services and local attorneys when they're going through custody issues, domestic violence, substance abuse, safety factors that come into play in families where one parent needs to be supervised while visiting their child. We provide this service on the weekends with the help of the Kannapolis YMCA. They in-kind us a donation of their space, so we are able to conduct the visits on the weekends, weekly, or however the court refers them. I attend sessions of domestic violence court every week, so I'm there for the courts to refer people to us. I answer questions. I introduce myself and the program, give them information. I do intakes with all of the folks that are referred to our program, and then I schedule all the visits. So in order for us to continue this program, that's why we're here, asking for your help. We feel like it's a very important component for the court systems, for local attorneys to navigate through contentious custody issues. And like I said, a lot of times there are safety factors that come into play with children being involved in domestic violence situations, drug abuse, neglect, and things like that.
And I know that we had some funding questions, and I wanted to be able to share those with you as well. As Beth said, we have been doing visitation station in Rowan County for 14 years, and 3 years ago we also added Cabarrus County at the request of I guess it was a task force from attorneys and judges and DSS and some guardian ad litem program asked us to replicate that here in Cabarrus, and we were glad to do it. We have an office there now. We got our notification in June, which was late. They usually let us know in March that we didn't get the funding. I was flabbergasted. They had funded us since we started 14 years ago, and I contacted them and asked them why. And it was the same thing we've been hearing, with the pandemic and all the extra expenses they've had, with all the funding going other places, that they didn't fund as many. As a matter of fact, we found out that out of the 10 applicants for visitation stations across the state, only 2 were funded from Governor's Crime, which was unheard of. And it's a very unique program. So what we did was, after we took the first day to panic, and then the next day we started rallying the community to find out what we could do. We notified our attorneys and our judges and our folks that partner with us on a day-to-day basis with DSS, and asked them to help us. So they started passing the plate, because our grant runs out September 30th, and we knew come October, right before the holidays hit, we had to have those children be able to see their parents. So we were passing the plate to see what we had. And we also took, because they wanted to know, with the Rowan Commission and the Cabarrus County Commission, wanted to know how much does Cabarrus County services cost, and how much does it just cost in Rowan County? So even though Governor's Crime gives us that grant as a whole, and we serve both counties, we took that and broke out the allocated costs for Rowan and Cabarrus, and they serve about the same number of folks, and we provide the services every weekend, but Rowan County was almost $111,000, just a few dollars short of that, and you guys with Cabarrus County was $105,000. So when we passed the plate, we got $18,120 from Rowan County. That included a big chunk was from the United Way of Rowan County, gave us some emergency funds, $11,500. And then with the passing the plate with the attorneys and people that, in the community, we got another $6,620. So Rowan County asked for the difference, $92,800. And I'm happy to report that they approved that about a week and a half ago. So we got the Rowan County side. So I had applied for the American Rescue Plan funds initially, and we didn't make the first round. So I contacted Rodney and asked him if he would reconsider with I think you had like $1.7 million or still had some funds that you hadn't allocated. So we asked for Cabarrus to consider funding what was, their difference was their $105,000, and we raised $5,500 in the community for them, so that left him $99,500. So that's why we're here. We're asking to see if you'll help us put Rowan and Cabarrus and continue the services for the rest of the grant year, for this new year. We're going to apply and resume our partnership with Governor's Crime. I'm not going to let them get off that easy. I'll keep on making that application. As a matter of fact, the RFPs are out now, and it's due January 31st. We're supposed to hear in March or first part of April if we got that money or not, so I'll keep you posted. But we know that it's a much-needed program. It keeps our kids safe and lets them stay connected with their parents. And we really need to provide this program, and we need the funds to help us get through this rock and a hard place, as Kyle said earlier, and help us get that funding. And while buys us some time to get that relationship back with Governor's Crime and get back on their list of funding as they have been doing in the past 14 years. Any questions?
And to add to that a little bit, we were actually brought down here by the Department of Human Services to add to their visitation.
DSS.
Because their research showed that if they gave extra visits to the families, aside from what they were lawfully able to give them, then their percentages of reunification with families and children went up significantly. So that's what we were brought in for them for, was to add that extra component for visitation. And we have fulfilled a lot of that. We've worked with them quite a bit, with families, giving them another 2 hours a week visitation with their children. And so that was a big part of why we were brought down here and why we think we still need to continue.
Right, and that's a very unique program, use of
Yes.
this program, and we like that idea about it. Of course, we've been hearing all night, Cabarrus has a lot of unique programs and a lot of uniqueness about themselves. And I'm proud to say that I'm from Cabarrus, so I know what that's like. But we are very happy to make that partnership, and DSS is really unifying families.
We also
through our
provide
help.
security with our visits. We have law enforcement on site. So I know that sometimes when DHS provides their visits, some of these social workers are put in situations where maybe it's not the safest place for them to be or to have a visit. So they can send those referrals that they have the safety risk to us because we do have security on site for the visitations. So it also gives them another option for, families that maybe they need that safety net.
Questions, commissioners?
Yeah, as Rodney said, and as the ladies have said, Karen 100% supports this request.
Rodney, this is part of, we held some funds back because we knew there would be some other needs, and this is.
Thank you, Rodney.
That is correct.
And so, did I hear you correctly, or maybe just expand on it? You guys, you go and sit through some of the, or all of the court hearings for?
I go to domestic violence session of court each week in 2 counties, Rowan and Cabarrus. So the judges down here actually introduce us while we're in the courtroom to people before the hearings are actually started, so that they know that they have this option if they want to have their hearing and go up there and ask for this service. So, and it's also sometimes a way that maybe we can work something out without a hearing, kind of helps negate things a little more. So those are I'm there to answer questions, to provide information, and have that availability for them.
Wow, I mean, that to me sounds like those are tough days.
It is.
Well, quite frankly, you have a front row seat to some not so good human behavior. And so if
And that's why
we
it's
can
such a
provide.
shock to not have funding.
Right, right. Well, that's what I was gonna say. If we can provide just a little bit of light for you, I mean, that seems like a very appropriate way for us to use those funds that we have been given the charge to administer.
We
And I-
appreciate it.
And I echo that. As a guardian ad litem, I have
Wonderful.
been,
You know.
I've been to visitations, you know, and I've watched and seen the impact it has on families and,
Absolutely.
you know, the long-term impact on the family, getting back together. I think it's a huge, wonderful service you guys provide on top of
Thank
what
you.
DHSS already does, and it's much needed here in Cabarrus County, and I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you.
So both of you.
Just a little bit irritated that they would withhold your funding at a time when we're talking about increased stress, increased
Mental
mental
health.
health issues,
We were
et cetera.
shocked.
Yeah, so
They got
haven't-
bombarded with lots of attorneys sending
I
them
have not
emails.
gotten specific numbers for Cabarrus County, but in Rowan County, the number of calls for domestic violence have risen 48% from 2020 to 2021.
wow.
So I don't know specifics for Cabarrus, but I'm sure it's very close in the same amount of change.
Right.
It's very sad to me to think that we could not provide this service in the middle of a pandemic and going out of a pandemic when people are really struggling. Mental health is, you know, it's bad.
Child abuse.
Child abuse and neglect. Drug numbers have risen. It's just been sad.
Well, I certainly think this is an appropriate use. This truly is American Rescue, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that would say that was a poor decision. Hopefully, they've heard from a lot of folks.
Well, I do have letters here. I have one from Judge Wilhelm and several attorneys, if anybody needs to see some
Right.
support letters. We've been bombarded with the support of the community
Great-
down here.
great
We just
support.
needed the funds.
Right, well, hopefully, we can help you with that. Commissioner Shute?
I just wanted to say that, you know, I'm glad that we're able to do this for you. Glad the money's laying there. We hadn't got to do like some counties to dig and scratch to try to find money for things like this. And another positive point for me is being a good neighbor to Rowan County. You know, for Cabarrus County, you know, we're known as being good neighbors anyway, you know, and so I want us to continue to collaborate on issues where that we're both affected. And I think it helps each other and it complements each county to be able to work together. So I like that part too.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much, and we appreciate your patience and longevity during our meeting.
Absolutely. Appreciate you all.
Okay, we move now to item 5.12, appropriation of low-income household water assistance program funding, and we're happy to have Laura Light with us to talk about that item.
Good evening, Commissioners. So tonight I'm bringing forward a budget amendment for a new and temporary program called the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program, also known as LIWAP, another acronym. This is a federally funded program. It is a new program that's going to provide emergency assistance to low-income households. That's going to prevent disconnection or provide assistance with reconnection for drinking water and wastewater services. So the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, along with the Division of Social Services, has graciously required the Department of Human Services or Social Services to administer this program. So that's why I'm here tonight. So LIHWAP assistance will be made available to households based on a priority group system to lessen the hardship on those households that have already lost water services or are in jeopardy of losing their water services. This program began December 1st and will be administered through September 30th of 2023 or until the funding is available. Cabarrus County's allocation is $226,472 in program funding, direct services, and administration funding in the amount of $45,255. No county funds are required, and it has been federally funded 100%. So again, just a budget amendment since this is a new program I want to bring forward tonight.
Any questions on this item?
No questions, but I'm glad it's fully funded, federal.
Yeah, some going out, some coming in.
I'll be glad to offset that going out.
It's nice to,
Right.
see that type, so.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, item 5.13 from the EDC, Spark Grant Funding for the Cabarrus Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We are delighted to have Paige Castrodale with us to talk about that item.
I'm the last man standing, or one of the last.
Yeah.
It's good to see you all this evening. I am here tonight on behalf of the partners at the Cabarrus Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Wanted to talk with you all about two programs that we have launched over the last 12 months, all focused on stimulating that organic economic development, which all the partners are committed to doing through the Cabarrus Center, and requesting funding to allow us to continue those programs. So the first one is the Spark Grant program, which is focused on startups that have scalable commercial ideas and can over time make an impact on the county's tax and employment base. We launched that program in spring of 2020. The companies, or excuse me, it would have been spring of 2021, there's a typo there. The companies, we had 21 total applicants in that first round. The companies went through curriculum that was all aimed at moving those ideas to a repeatable revenue model. So taking them from that early stage, or that early idea stage into something that would actually make money. 8 of those finalists pitched to the Cabarrus Entrepreneurship Council. Some of you were there that night. 4 companies were awarded $5,000 grants. And then all of those applicants continue to be supported by the Cabarrus Center through online coursework, office hours, and then access to the mentorship program, which you all graciously funded earlier this year in partnership with MIT. So that's the Spark program. The second program we launched more recently, again, it says fall of 2020. Is anyone else losing their mind over what year it actually is? It was actually fall of 2021. This program is focused on new and existing retail goods and services, looked at food and beverage, entertainment businesses. Some of these were scalable through franchising or licensing or e-commerce, but most of them would be Main Street businesses. We are seeing a lot of revitalization in Cabarrus County and all of its communities, and felt like there was a need to do more to support the development of Main Street businesses, and so that's what the Retail Lab was. 32 folks applied for that. 16 were accepted into the boot camp, which was a 6-week program that was run in partnership with the Small Business Center. Again, 8 of those companies pitched to the Cabarrus Entrepreneurship Council, and then we had 5 grants that were awarded. So there's a space within the Cabarrus Center that actually faces Union Street that we're going to activate as a storefront. And so 6 of the companies that participated in that will have the opportunity to set up shop, sort of a co-working retail space, so to speak, where they'll learn about operating a point of sale system and inventory and store displays and that sort of thing. And that'll be on a 6-month pop-up rotation. So what we've learned through launching these 2 programs, and again, this is a collaboration between the Cabarrus Economic Development, the Cabarrus Chamber, the Small Business Center, Flywheel Co-working, and the Flywheel Foundation, the small business, SBTDC. I mean, it's several partners are all working together over there. But what we've learned through these two programs is that our ability to provide grant funding and programs like this is really what stimulates that pipeline. The Spark grant was $5,000, which might not seem like a lot, but if you're getting started and you're trying to, you have an idea and you want to get out of that early idea stage, to be able to offset some of those startup costs is really beneficial. And so what we're asking for is $75,000, which would give us the ability to continue these programs over 3 years, and it would support the administrative and operational costs as well as the curriculum associated with both of those programs. We are talking with the City of Concord and Kannapolis about their participation as well, and then there would be matching funds to be secured from private donors and corporate sponsors, foundations, that sort of thing, to actually support the grants themselves. So total, we're talking about $150,000 from the public sector, an additional $150,000 from the private sector. That would allow us to run both of these programs twice a year, 2 cohorts each year, over the next 3 years. Any questions that I can answer?
I'm just curious, on these two programs where you have more participants than do the pitch, how do you pick the ones who are going to do the pitch?
So the curriculum that they went through for both the Spark program and the retail lab is really, it's kind of a crash course in, do you know how to run a business? Do you have the drive? Is this a hobby, or is this something that you're really going to do full time? And so it's they take them through several different courses, and then at the end of that, the retail lab, anyone who was interested in pitching could pitch, and only 8 chose to pitch. But the Spark grant, it was, we went through the applications. There were mentors that were assigned to each team to kind of help coach them through that process, and then ultimately it was like, this is the best of the best. These are the most viable, and then those are the ones that pitched.
And what was the value of the grants on the retail lab?
It ranged between it was $2,500 at the high end, down to like $500, and then there was one company that has a baked good business, and she's actually going to be setting up at the Cabarrus Center in the Social Commons, selling her delicious cakes from there. Yeah.
Paige, who would be eligible? Who would be eligible for these 2 programs?
So the Spark grant, we're looking for companies that are pre-revenue. So they haven't started making any money. We were really targeting those early stage companies. In the application for that program, we said that we wanted them to be either based in Cabarrus County or committed to using the resources at the Cabarrus Center. When we first opened that application, we focused it solely on Cabarrus County and said only those residents or those businesses could apply. And then we weren't getting the traction that we hoped for, so we opened it up to the Charlotte region. And that was actually a really good move on our part, because what happened was we attracted folks from Mecklenburg County and Rowan County and other parts of the region who now are so, they feel so supported by the resources at the Cabarrus County that that's where they're growing their businesses, which is exactly what we hoped would happen. One of the companies, Battery Exchange, I think you guys remember, he has a kiosk where you can kind of check out a portable battery charger to charge your phone if you're at a concert or a bar or an airport or that kind of thing. He has rented out basement space at the Cabarrus Center, and that's now his warehouse for these kiosks, and he's working out of the Cabarrus Center several days a week. And that company is getting national recognition and going through multiple investment rounds. And so he was initially in Charlotte, and now we have offered him resources that he couldn't get elsewhere. So that's the Spark grant. And then the retail lab, we're probably going to fine tune that a little bit moving forward. One of the things that we learned through this first round was that a lot of the folks were not quite ready to commit to operating a storefront. And our goal with that program is to take folks out of that program and plug them into available vacant commercial space somewhere in the county. And so we'll make sure that that's, a little bit more clear in the application. And then we also are hoping to expand the food and beverage industry. We've talked a lot with the CVB about, as a destination, our desire to have restaurants that aren't necessarily franchises. And so for us to kind of marry the resources of the Cabarrus Center with the resources of the CVB from a hospitality and tourism industry or standpoint, and, end up with some sort of program that would be focused on churning out restaurant owners and that kind of thing. That's sort of our next phase that we're exploring.
Who are the people that they pitched to? How do you find that group, or who is that group?
So the Cabarrus Entrepreneurship Council is that entity is sort of lives under Cabarrus Economic Development, because we were one of the founding partners at the Cabarrus Center. On that council is representation from the Cabarrus Chamber, the Small Business Center, the Flywheel Foundation, Flywheel Co-working, and then we have 3 sort of resident entrepreneurs, so business owners in the community who, we're kind of getting their perspective. So it's all of the Cabarrus stakeholders, if you will. We invited members of the public to attend. They didn't judge, but we had them there just to be able to ask questions. I think our next one, we're probably going to make it a bigger event where we were selective about who we invited to the first one, because at the time we were still operating under COVID precautions. But I think there was a lot of community interest in what was happening there. And I think for us to sort of shine a light on what our community is doing to support this type of business development would be beneficial. So I anticipate a larger, flashier event next time.
Just one last thing, because I know we got to move on, but you said something about working with the restaurants, food, beverage service, that type thing. Are you working with like Hickory Ridge, with the culinary arts program to maybe help those students that say, hey, I like this, I want to be a chef, or I want to start my own business making cakes.
Right.
Are we working with those, or maybe even Johnson Wales, some of the entities like that
That's
could
right.
feed us, with people, applicants?
So what we envision for that is to reach out to Johnson Wales, like you said, and some of the other culinary institutes in the state and the region, and establish some sort of program. We've talked about, are there vacant restaurants in the community that would be willing to rent out their kitchen space in some way? Once we have it established, then we can plug in the high school academy. And the academy piece, we've talked about that on a larger level. How do we leverage the CTE programs, and how do we engage the students, and how do we support a culture of entrepreneurship within the high schools as well? If you sit on any of these meetings with the Cabarrus Entrepreneurship Council, it's idea after idea after idea. We get so excited about the potential that the center has, but it's just baby steps in getting there.
Well, I think it's absolutely great, for such a small amount of money. But when you add in what you're talking about doing, and then you throw in the Advanced Technology Center in Kannapolis, there's no reason for our kids to go somewhere else when they can work here, go to school here and work here. And I think that would be most parents' dream, is to keep your kids close to home instead of traveling 50, 75, 80 miles. And of course, yours is coming up like a little adder there.
Yeah, that's my
If you
goal,
could
is to
keep 'em-
get at least one of them to stick around here.
Yeah, that's right. Keep them close, but you got to give them something to do, though. So with these things we're talking about, Steve, that will help. It'll help keep kids close to home and give them a good education. They can't get it nowhere else. And be proud to be a person who lives in Cabarrus County. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I think this is an excellent program. I did attend that Spark Grant presentation, and it was quite interesting to hear the proposals that were made. I have also had some involvement with the mentoring network, and I think that this is something that we have talked about for many, many years. We have our incentive program to recruit the large industry, and you know, for a very long time, we've said, you know, how can we support our small businesses and our local homegrown businesses, and you're doing just that. And so I think it's an excellent program, and certainly appreciate everyone involved. And you've got quite a few folks that are working on this. So that level of collaboration is great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Just real quick, Mr. Chairman, just to let you know, we will add a budget amendment to that one that will show up on the consent agenda with it.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Okay, we move now to item 5.14, update capital project fund budget and related project ordinance, and we're glad to have Wendy Hegler with us, along with Will Crabtree.
Yes. So the first part of this agenda item deals with Kannapolis City Schools. They have requested, they had $500,000 allocated for the tennis courts at A.L. Brown, and they want to change the purpose and use $330,000 for Shady Brook roof and $70,000 for a boiler at A.L. Brown High School, and the rest of $100,000 for track maintenance at A.L. Brown High School. It doesn't require a budget amendment because it's not increasing the overall total budget, but we wanted to keep you informed of the change and see if there's any questions or concerns with this change.
I did want to add one thing. It was a typo on my part. It's Jackson Park roof instead of Shady Brook roof. I apologize for that.
I don't have a question, but I feel like we should have one since you've been here as long as you have, to make your time worthwhile.
That's quite all right.
Here's a question, and here's why I wanted him to come, so he could talk to you guys, is that the board approved in your budget $500,000 for the maintenance of the tennis courts, which at the time was a very important project. Now you're taking that money and moving it to other projects. What happens to the tennis courts, and why aren't you spending it as proposed?
Right. We have had a terrible time finding a replacement site for the tennis courts right now. We've looked at sites near A.L. Brown. We've looked over at G.W. Carver Elementary School to try to find a site. Everything has come back not suitable ground to put the tennis court on. We've also engaged in some preliminary talks with the city of Kannapolis to try to partnership with them to be able to put it somewhere. We haven't been able to as of yet. So the likelihood of us finding a spot this fiscal year was going to be probably none. Jackson Park roof was on the CIP list. We thought we could get a few more years out of it, but we've had a wing at the school where Cabarrus County Maintenance has told us that they cannot fix any longer, and when it would rain, we would literally have rain pouring into a classroom. So it had to be fixed. The boiler at A.L. Brown, this boiler serves the cyber campus area and the media center at A.L. Brown. It's different from the boiler we replaced last year at A.L. Brown. But it's gone, cannot be repaired. So we had to replace that boiler. The track, we're still on target to do that this year. It's going to be a little more expensive than we thought. So all that taken into account, instead of coming in and asking you for $330,000 more and $70,000 more on top of the tennis courts, we thought it would be fiscally responsible just to ask to move that budget since we were going to be able to use it this year.
Any other questions?
So at some point in time in the future, we'll have, in your budget will be a because this said maintenance, but you're talking about a full relocation of the tennis courts.
It is. It's we have tried to replace them one time already on the site they're at, and it's never going to happen. It's just not suitable for what they are. So yes, in the future you'll see a play.
And the problem is they crack.
They crack and shift, and we thought we had cleaned out all the bad soil last time, and everything was working good, and then same old problems. So after 2 times, we've decided to move on, not try that site anymore.
Right. Okay, and then you had another part of that.
Yes, so, yeah, thank you.
Thank y'all.
There's a $1.7 billion budget amendment to increase the EMS headquarters budget due to increased construction cost, and I'll direct any questions to that to Kyle. And then also includes $200,000 or $210,000 for deferred maintenance for the Milestone Building.
Okay, questions on those items, commissioners?
Can we get an update on what the deferred, I mean, we all saw the building, but what specifically we're spending $210,000 on?
He's on his way.
Yes, sir, yep.
You want to go stand over here?
So the bulk of that money is going in, we can't talk to the building. So HVAC systems, generator systems, so a bulk of it's going into that. We were able to get the fire alarm system where we could work on it. The security is still an issue, but the biggest one that came right off the bat was air conditioning. I couldn't change any thermostat at all, so we had to get it onto our platform to be able to control it. And we're also in the back, we're doing about $50,000 worth of tree removal from the BMP in the back, stormwater. Yeah, and that's coming one way or the other. That was.
And we knew that, I mean, we
Yep.
talked about that before, I just didn't know
Yep.
exactly what.
It's a bunch of things in there, and ITS is gonna eventually, we're working with them to try to coordinate on how to get card readers and cameras. We've got it limping along so we can give tours, but eventually the building of that size will need to be connected to what I will call our ITS and infrastructure, network, so we can talk to it and control it from here versus up there.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you. We will move now to item 5.15. Recommended approval of preferred alternates for Franklin Park Barn replacement and emergency equipment warehouse.
Yes, and in the past, I've come up for preferred alternates. It's how we're doing a bulk of our projects is before bidding them, I come up to the board to get those approved. I'm actually combining on these two projects because there's not that many for them. This is for the Franklin Park Barn, which there's only one, and it's a hand dryer. So it sounds not too important, but when you have 150 of them, it actually is. That having that standardized makes a lot of things easier for my staff in going around and stocking those. The other one is for the emergency equipment warehouse and ITS building. There's a lot more on those. They're same type of preferred alternates that you have seen for the courthouse and for the EMS headquarters. Again, for us, usually the general statute that asks you to come up with the reasons you're doing it. For us, it's standardization. So it's things like carpet tiles and ceiling tiles and hand dryers, nothing too more elaborate than that.
Okay.
But I can go up to the board if anybody wants me to and point those out.
Any other questions on that item? All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we move now to item 5.16 from the Sheriff's Office, acceptance of private funds for purchase of motorcycle, and Chief Bailey has waited patiently.
Thank you, Board. Our motorcycle coordinator had a conversation with Miss Amy Thomas, who is the owner of Speedway Harley-Davidson. Our motor unit currently has a lease through Harley-Davidson for $1 a year as part of their law enforcement leasing program. At the end of the lease, the bike is up for sale. Ms. Thomas at Speedway Harley-Davidson has asked to donate money to the county to purchase that motorcycle at the end of the lease. As she advises in the letter of intent, the lease expires December the 11th. So she's wanting to make this donation as quickly as possible to successfully buy that lease and turn it over to the county, for the county to own this bike outright at the end of the lease. So I'm asking the board tonight to suspend the rules and hopefully accept this money so that we can turn it around and pay it to Harley Davidson. Yep.
So do y'all think that's too much of an inconvenience to accept donation?
And she also wants to, as a part of this donation, she also wants to donate up to 4 electric bikes, each having a value of up to $3,724.94, not to exceed 4 bikes. We have talked internally about what to do with electric bikes. We've never had an electric bike at the office before, so we thought it might be feasible to start those out in our governmental security unit that we had that patrols the county buildings currently downtown, maybe as a good starting point for those bikes. So that is also included in the donation if the board wants to consider that tonight.
I will make a motion to suspend the rules of procedure due to time constraints.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. That motion passes.
Thank you.
And
I'll make a motion to accept the donation award and adopt the associated budget amendment.
I'll second.
okay, motion and a second. Any discussion on that item? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say no. That motion passes. Thank you very much. And we move now to item 5.17, which was added to our agenda at the beginning of the meeting. And that is regarding the gun ordinance, which we have talked about on several previous occasions. And Mr. Goldberg will talk with us about that along with Chief Bailey.
Good evening, Commissioners, again. So previously, as you know, the discussion of this ordinance was tabled at a regular meeting a few months ago. Following that tabling, staff were kind of given the direction to propose some alternative approaches based on the feedback we heard from the board and from the members of the public that participated that evening. What I'm passing out right now is a copy of the current ordinance. You can see it there, it's signed in the back, that's the first page. That is the law right now. As you recall, we still have that 500 yards, and that's from any occupied building or residence, business, house of worship, educational facility, park facility, or any other public gathering, regardless of whether these places are occupied. And then we have the measurement distance language. It kind of makes it very clear from structure to point of discharge, and then making clear that it's applicable outside the corporate limits of the county. So that is the law right now. Next, we have a comparison chart, but I'll actually go back to the last page, and you'll see this is a new proposed ordinance to modernize the standards governing the discharge of firearms in the unincorporated areas of Cabarrus County. This was based on a series of staff discussions at direction of members of the board and other stakeholders, worked with the sheriff's office as well as the district attorney's office to kind of internalize that feedback. If I will, I can take you through it. I would say it was overall, it is an attempt to streamline the ordinance, collapse a couple parts that were in the previous version, and collapse them into more a couple different similar items and reorganize it, but make it clearer. I'd say the most substantive change from what we discussed previously is the changing of the feet that we're talking about, and I'll talk through that in just a second. So starting on line 20 of the draft in subsection A, we see again the kind of the classic definition of covered structure, it being an occupied structure or residence, business, house of worship, educational facility, park facility, or any other public gathering facility, regardless of whether these structures are occupied. We also see number 2 on line 25 there. Firearm means a device designed to use or expel projectile using explosive charges of propellant such as a handgun, shotgun, rifle, or cannon. So the first thing I'll highlight here is an air gun is not being included in that version, versus the current law does include air gun. The subsection B, starting on line 28, this has now been collapsed, all the prohibited activities, 1 through 6. So 1 is carelessly or heedlessly endanger any person or property. That's kind of more of a catch-all. Number 2, while previously impaired by impairing substance of alcohol or Schedule 1 narcotic. That was language suggested by the district attorney's office. Paragraph 3, on, from, or across any public street, highway, or right-of-way. So again, on or across a street. 4, on the property of another without permission from a person who owns or otherwise controls such property at the time of discharge. She was shooting on someone else's property without their permission, at any distance.
So when you say shooting on, you don't mean shooting, the projectile's not going on, they're standing on the.
They are standing on that property.
Okay, wanted to make sure I was
Sure.
following that.
So that then goes into paragraph 5 of line 35, in a manner causing the projectile to enter the property of another without permission. So again, that's on, you're legal where you are, but now you're shooting across someone else's property without permission. And then number 6 is the one I think covers, gets the most attention here, is within 300 feet of a covered structure. Remember, covered structure is a defined term starting on line 21. A covered structure located on a parcel other than the parcel from which the firearm was discharged, which shall be measured from the point of discharge to the actual physical structure of a covered structure. So we collapsed a couple things into one kind of consciousness. One is the 300 feet, and then referring to from the covered structure, and then on a parcel other than the parcel from which the firearm was discharged. So in this case, if you have a parcel and there's multiple, it doesn't count if you're, the distance only counts if you're on another parcel, if the covered structure is on another parcel other than the parcel from which you're sitting from. So in virtue, if you're the landowner and you want to walk out your front porch and you're within 300 feet of a residence, you can do that because it's your building, it's on your parcel of land. As long as that another residence or one of those covered buildings is not within that 300 bubble outside of that parcel. So that's the idea. That was kind of collapsing some of the concepts that we saw in some other of the exceptions in the previous version. The next paragraph in subsection C now, we talk about exceptions. In the next page, the general exceptions, again, we kind of collapse several concepts together. One is a person in defense of person, animal, or property, including a person protecting a person, animal, or property against any dangerous or destructive animal. So very broad concepts of self-defense in that regard. We collapse a couple of those down. Next, by a person acting pursuant to lawful directions of law enforcement officers, that's from state statute. By a person hunting birds or animals in compliance with essentially the North Carolina general statutes, that's state-regulated hunting is exempted from this ordinance pursuant to state law as it's required. And then last, by law enforcement officers or members of the armed forces acting in the line of duty, including for training purposes, so official actions. The last is exceptions that apply only to the distance requirement, so that 300 feet. There's 2 exceptions: a shooting range or other training facility operated by a law enforcement agency, or by a person performing in an historical ceremony or commemorative function in which such discharge does not involve the release of projectiles, so shooting blanks in that regard. Subsection D, applicability, this is again only the unincorporated areas of the county. And then 19, line 19E, we maintain the conflict of other laws, making very clear that we're not adjusting other ordinances or laws that aren't being discussed here. And then F is enforcement. That is compliant with the decriminalization statute there as well. So we are in line with that. The mid-page, the second page there, going back, is a comparison of the current law, and the leftmost column, the current ordinance. And then we have the proposed ordinance that was previously discussed and then tabled. And then the last revised proposed ordinance is what we are discussing here today. So that kind of describes how things have evolved over time. I'm happy to offer any questions, answer any questions, or Chief Bailey's here as well, or any of the commissioners, please.
I would add that in the revised proposed ordinance, the sheriff's out on an emergency call, but I have been involved in the conversations with him in regard to this. It does lie in line with his ideas and what he believes to be an appropriate ordinance for the county, and I also agree with him, obviously, on that as well. It's all in line with what we have discussed.
I did have our GIS folks do a map showing the 300-foot radius around in a typical subdivision. It's actually in one of our subdivisions that are acre or more lots. If you want to, if you're interested in seeing that, we can show it to you. If you're not, if you're comfortable, so.
Yeah, I think if it's easy to project. Mm-hmm.
That was a rush job, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I have a lot that is 200 feet wide and 600 feet deep, and there's a house to the side of me within 300 feet, then that applies to shooting anywhere on that
So the best-
600 feet deep piece of property.
So the best thing is it's kind of like a high school geometry word problem, in the sense that draw a 300-foot circle around the point of discharge, and then subtract the area of the lot in which it's being shot. So anything that goes beyond that parcel is going to be that regulated area. So if there is a covered building within that 300-foot bubble, but outside of the parcel, then that would be covered.
Right.
So what we did with this circle is, this is 300 feet buffer. So I was
talking to Mike.
Well, that just clears it all.
Yeah, exactly what I thought. So what my team did was just took, this is Vandenberg Estates. We were looking for a subdivision in the county. So I knew everybody would be familiar with that location. So using those homes, we did a 300-foot buffer around each building. So to David's point, that's kind of, it becomes a spirograph, because they start overlapping circles upon that. So that's all this representation is a 300-foot buffer around each building. So obviously we can't represent where a potential person would be standing to potentially be firing and then do that. But I don't know how much that helps you, David, but that's the best we could do on a short notice.
It's better than I thought you could do in the meantime.
Now, my understanding, and I think to the chairman's point, if I am on my property and I'm shooting within 300 feet of my home, I'm allowed to do that without any violations. My home, I could shoot within 300 feet. If I'm greater than 300 feet from any other occupied dwelling that's not my own, if I'm within that 300 feet, then I could not discharge my firearm, because I would be within the 300 feet.
Or across the or shooting across.
Yeah, or shooting across someone else's property. But I think in your example, you said you were within 300 feet of someone else's house, but you're on your property. Right. You would not be able to discharge according to this revised ordinance.
Even though I've got 600 feet behind me to.
You could move 20 feet further down into your property and extend that distance from the.
Away from
yes,
that other
that is
residence.
correct. That is correct.
That makes sense.
That is correct.
So that's the key is as far as distances go, we maintain very clearly that it's from the point of discharge to the covered structure.
Right.
So that's the key there.
Yeah, and really, quite frankly, the original problem with the ordinance, and I having spent many years out on the road, it was just hard to enforce. This is much clearer. It gives people a safe distance to shoot, and yet allows us, if there is a violation, to be able to effectively handle the violation, as opposed to having to kind of come back and punt to zoning and try to get some measurements, and then it was, what was a residential district. From what I see in the rewrite, this is exactly what we've talked about, and I think is a very measured approach to how the growth has affected the county, but yet honoring the rights of people to be able to discharge their firearms. I think it falls in line with what we have again discussed previously.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I think it's important too to note that if you feel threatened or in danger or self-defense.
Yes.
That's you're in a whole different world there.
Yes.
You're not showing up and measuring 300 feet.
And also,
Doesn't infringe on any hunting
No,
rights
sir.
at
No,
all.
sir. It also addresses aggressive animals, I believe, in there as well.
Yes, so make it very clear.
Which has happened.
Yes.
I guess the biggest question that I would have is how do we publish this? I know the last time that we discussed it, there were people that said, well, I've never seen the completed ordinance or, and I'm not sure exactly how it was, but do you have thoughts on how we make sure, number one, that everybody has access to this, and number two, that they have notification that this will be on our regular agenda on December 20th?
So I'd say given the public interest in this ordinance, we could, again, call a public hearing and have that notice out. It's not essential. We don't need it for this kind of ordinance.
And we did do that last time.
We did do that last
didn't we?
time.
Yeah.
So beyond that, and it was included as part of our normal agenda and board packet. It was available just like any other ordinance that goes through. But, because I think the last discussion brought people in who were not familiar with how the county works and how those documents are made available, there was a missed opportunity. They were not felt included in that. So we could talk with Kasha and others to talk about other messaging, whether send additional notices to the paper and news or social media outreach. Take a more, if it was appropriate, to take a more forward-leaning approach on noticing that this will be a topic of discussion if the board so chooses.
And I think that was one of the topics that we discussed, that part of this is education. So we need to educate them that, yes, this is on, this is what's going on. I know a lot of the 2A world does a lot of social media, a lot of the website stuff. They do follow along all of that really closely because there are certain firearms ordinances, not ordinances, but laws consistently changing within the federal and the state government. So those are some things, social media, they do follow quite a bit. I think the biggest thing is educating them that this is going to be on. It's going to be an important factor in, getting people, if they want to come in for public comment, great. If they don't, at least they were given the opportunity to view it and review it and make an educated decision if they're okay with it or not.
And I think it's equally important to put not only the ordinance on there, but also this comparison. So that I think that answers a lot of questions that we spent quite a bit of time on last time we talked about it. Which kudos to you for putting that together.
Hard lessons learned.
Yeah, yeah. And so we can publish that on the webpage along.
Social media.
Yeah.
And the newspaper if we need to.
Yeah, so that if somebody becomes aware of it and they want to read this, they can easily access it. Of course, they can always call Lauren and she can direct them to the right place for sure. Questions or comments? Looks like Commissioner Hughes got his finger on the button.
Well, since I brought us to this, I might as well talk a little bit about it. Well, Chief, on the, now you're talking about recommending the revised proposed ordinance to 300 feet?
If you're looking at the example that the chairman just referenced, that
Yeah, on the far right?
Yes, sir,
Yeah.
the far right, yes, sir.
Okay, well, obviously, you know, that's a considerable difference from what it was with the old 1967
That is-
version, going from 1,500 feet down to 300 feet.
Yes.
How much of a difference, if any, do you think it would be to increase that to the 500 feet, which was the proposed revision to start with? And the reason I say that is because an acre is 212 square feet. And if the house is in the middle of that, then you've got what? 200 feet this way or whatever, 175 feet this way, 175 feet. So in pretty much every case, a person that owned just 1 acre would not, he couldn't shoot no gun on his property. Is that right?
Well, if you're actually going to the 500 feet, it would decrease his amount of ability to shoot. And when you're talking about square footage, not every parcel of land obviously has a structure right on the property line as well. I know in the conversations with Sheriff Shaw, the distance was kind of, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another when you're talking about 300 feet to 500 feet. We were more concerned with the enforceability of it, being able to clearly measure when there's a violation. And again, having the conversations that I've had, the revised ordinance is satisfactory in our opinion. The 300 feet gives people ample room to shoot and yet protects people. I mean, obviously, you can't protect everyone from every event that ever happens in the world, but certainly I believe with the revisions that are listed, we honor both the safety and the ability for people to discharge their firearms accordingly. So if that answers your question, I hope it does.
Yeah, it does, but it'll probably, of course, we didn't have a tremendous amount of complaints, I don't think, anyway. We did have complaints, and they were always, I think the sheriff put it to me like this. He said, well, we would go out to investigate, and we would have one upset party, but when we left, we had 2 upset parties. And so
yes,
we was trying to, so I think that this will cut down on that. But on the other hand, it's probably going to create more ordinance, noise ordinance complaints.
There's certainly the potential for noise ordinance, but right now the ordinance speaks to particularly after 11 p.m., between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. at night. So most of the officers try to use good sound judgment in determining whether somebody's creating a problem with their neighbors. And there's always going to be those instances where the officers, will maybe have a slight bit of difficulty in determining, well, do I tell them to stop shooting or not? But if I remember correctly, the revised ordinance also just speaks to, if the deputy goes out there and determines that you're shooting unsafely, regardless of the distance requirement, he can ask them to stop and still charge them with a violation of the ordinance. That would be his issue to clear up in court. So if he sees that, yeah, you're outside the 300 feet, but you're shooting directly at a house or children, riding their golf carts or whatever the case may be, the officer has the discretion to write for a violation of the ordinance without that distance requirement being into effect. So that part is also actually has not been in what we currently had previously. So you get a reduction, but it gives the officer more latitude to write for those violations when necessary.
And that's basically what we wanted. But the
That's
number
right.
one thing about the whole deal was public safety.
That's
though.
exactly right.
That's the number one thing, public safety. And, I still feel like, me personally, that the 300 feet is not an adequate amount. I could live with it, but I really, from living out in the county, I don't know how many of you live in the county other than me, 300 feet is not far. It is not far at all,
Right.
And so, and you're looking at some of the rifles and handguns that these guys shoot these days, it sounds like cannons going off. And it mentions cannons in here. Some of them are almost cannons. And so, but, like I say, that's just the way it is. That's the way I feel about it. But I'm one, and there's 4 more of my fellow commissioners here that I have to decide if 300 feet versus 500 feet, less restrictions, more restrictions, but keeping in mind public safety number one.
That's absolutely right. I don't think you would hear an argument from certainly, again, I'm having to speak for the sheriff, but I know in speaking with him, the 300 to 500 feet is probably a hill he's not willing to die on. Between those distances, we still feel like the 300 is an appropriate distance. But again, you know, even at 300 feet, at 500 feet, there's no 100% guarantee of someone not getting injured or something catastrophic happening. But you know, it is a reasonable distance, in our opinion, to have included in the revised ordinance.
Okay,
Kind of-
other.
Well,
Yes,
I was
sir.
just gonna make a comment. I've sort of said from the get-go that the purpose of this, as it was explained to us originally, was to give the sheriff's office a way to make sure, as Commissioner Shue said, that they didn't leave with two people unhappy instead of just one. And so, as we've moved through this, and again, as you said, Sheriff's not here, I don't wanna put words in his mouth, but I did ask him before he left if this satisfied what the ultimate goal was, and he said it did. So, I mean, I wanted to defer to you guys and your discretion. You know, we have to sort of sign off on it, but we're not out there enforcing it. And we're not the ones that have to go to court if you see something that you think is not safe, and then you have to work it out later. I mean, but if the 3 or the 5, you know, to me, that's probably, I don't think it makes a huge difference. You know, I live somewhere, I mean, you can't shoot anything anywhere near where I live, so I mean, it's just houses on, you know, right next to each other, but that's why you go out somewhere else to a range or a facility that's what it's designed for, and that's what you go. And I enjoy doing that as much as I enjoy anything, is taking a shotgun and shooting clays or doing whatever. So if it satisfies you, what you guys have ultimately wanted to try to accomplish, then I'm fine.
And to Commissioner Shue, and to your point as well, one of the things that we like in the revised version is, if you look at outside 29 in the revision, it says no person may discharge a firearm carelessly and heedlessly so as to endanger any person or property. That's strictly upon the discretion of the officer that's responding to the scene. So in the Commissioner Shue's case, if there's a discharge that he feels like is dangerously close or is going to danger or damage, the officer can go out there, assess what they see, and then address that either with the shooter, say, hey, stop, you know, to me, this is careless, let's, you know, please stop, or we're going to have to come, if we come back out, we're going to have to, you know, issue a citation, something to that effect. It gives a little bit more discretion to the deputy that's responding to the scene where we had none previously. So I think we have to kind of look at this sets a baseline, and the officer in many instances can go out there and make a determination quickly and make a judgment for himself whether he feels like it's in violation. Certainly, that particular provision within the ordinance gives the officer that discretion.
I think also the DA's office signed off on the 300
Yes,
feet.
yes, yes, they did.
Yep, they have reviewed this ordinance. They think it is something they can enforce.
Yes, in court. Yes.
One other quick question, and just for my own
Sure.
education, is handgun and pistol, are they interchangeable? Is there a specific reason you use the word handgun in line 26?
Line 26, yeah.
So there's a little research that's drawn from state statute, the definition of firearm using state statute. It's one of the, from a legal standpoint, it's a difference without a difference. At one point, a pistol was, I believe, was more referring to a single action firearm in particular, versus a handgun was more focused on a semi-automatic firearm, a handheld firearm. At this point, the differences have melded into nothing, so handgun is appropriate. Yeah.
I wanted to say one more thing, and we can get out of here, but I've lived where I live for right at 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And up until we started talking about the gun ordinance, I had never had a complaint, never. But I had two within 2 weeks of each other. When one neighbor called me and said, I was trying to talk to so-and-so in my front yard, said the people over here was shooting, said it was like that for a solid 2 hours. They complained about the noise.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we've done here, knowing when we went into this gun ordinance thing, that we was gonna have the pros and the cons. We know that there was gonna be opposition. There were gonna be a lot that didn't like it, obviously, and some that did like it. So, and that's so the way it is in politics. If you can make 50% of the people happy, you done pretty good. So I don't know how we did on this, but I think it's 100% better than what it was. And I told the chairman, you know, I'm not really happy with the 300 feet, but I can live with it. Because if it makes your job and the public supposedly safer, and obviously the deputy's job is to enforce the law. And so we agree to it. They go out, they make that decision. And they could have the jurisdiction, and they would have everything they need to resolve the issue. And that'd be all there is to it.
Yep.
And so, but I can go along with it like it is, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Hopefully, either you and/or the sheriff will be able to be present at our meeting on the 20th.
I believe the sheriff will be out of town. I will be there, so I will take the heat if
Right.
there's anybody
And,
there.
I think that if at all possible, if the district attorney could be there to speak to their part, we can certainly make that request.
I'm sure we can probably make some arrangements. We got
Yeah.
some people in high places we can get the.
But I think that would be beneficial that they've been involved in the creation of the ordinance and the revisions of it. And I think this board has been pretty vocal that we are anxious to support the sheriff's office and the DA's office in this. So if we can demonstrate that we're all on the same page, and it sounds like we are, I think that will be very helpful.
I think, and again, I don't want to keep this any longer because God knows I know it's getting late. But I think the point to understand is that laws do not protect people in any way, quite frankly, in the sense that there are law violators out there. People are going to break the law regardless of what we put down. We could put down 1,000,000 feet. At the end of the day, we have to approach this ordinance like we do everything else in a reasonableness standard. And the fact of the matter is, we found it's reasonable to have this distance, and we feel like it's a good compromise with the ability to have a little bit of discretion, again, from the officers. And that's what we were looking for, is being able for us to personally look at a scene and tell you, hey, we think this is unsafe, stop it. You know, so that actually gives us a lot more flexibility to enforce safety issues when we go out on the scene with this current revision.
Great, excellent. All right, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Mr. Chairman, one thing, at the regular meeting, excuse me, are you gonna have another public hearing or just,
Good question. And I think that's up to the wishes of the board. And so do you think for us to publicize this, put it on our regular agenda, of course, give people an opportunity to speak during public comment, will be sufficient? Or do you think we should go to the additional, well, I don't know, where do we have to advertise public hearings? Is it online? On the website? So there's really no additional expense, or it boils down to about the same thing, but at least that's officially announced. Does anybody have a preference on that? Last time we did advertise it as a public hearing.
Right. I think because this is a topic that's been followed pretty closely, it might behoove us to go ahead and put it on.
Yeah.
Put it on there.
Yeah, I think that will be fine. Thank you for reminding on that. So that we will just, when we add that to our agenda, much like the other two items on new business, we will label this as a public hearing as well. Okay, and so I think that completes our agenda, which takes us to the approval of the regular meeting agenda. And the item that we just discussed would be added to new business as H3, including the public hearing. So do I hear any other revisions to the agenda? H3, Yes, so if there are no other adjustments, I would entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda with the addition of item H3, and which includes a public hearing for discussion of the proposed gun ordinance. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. We do have need of a closed session. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session as authorized by North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A1, 3, 4, and 6. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. We are now in closed session. We thank our viewing audience for joining us tonight. And we will, since we have stretched this meeting out so long, we now have the room pretty much cleared. So we'll have closed session in this space.